Ethan Parker sat frozen as his co-workers' laughter echoed through the restaurant, their eyes gleaming with malicious anticipation. They'd promised him a friendly dinner, a chance to finally belong. But as the minutes ticked by and their smirks grew wider, the truth crystallized. He wasn't their guest. He was their entertainment. Somewhere in this upscale restaurant, a woman was walking toward their table. A woman they'd chosen specifically to humiliate him. The divorced dad. The office joke. The man too broken to deserve respect. Tonight, they'd finally get their punchline. Or so they thought. Want to see how this story unfolds? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Morton and Associates had a particular quality that Ethan Parker had grown to despise. They hummed with a frequency that seemed designed to burrow into the base of his skull, a constant reminder of the 47 hours he spent beneath them each week. But it wasn't the lights that made him feel invisible. It was the people. Ethan had worked at the mid-sized accounting firm for nearly 15 years, long enough to watch fresh graduates transform into senior analysts, long enough to see 3 different CEOs come and go, long enough to become part of the furniture. Useful furniture, perhaps. The kind you don't notice until you need it, but furniture nonetheless. At 42, he'd perfected the art of occupying space without demanding attention. His desk sat in the corner of the 3rd floor, positioned just far enough from the main thoroughfare that people forgot he existed until tax season rolled around. He preferred it that way, or at least he'd convinced himself he did. After the divorce, invisibility had felt like mercy. The whispers had started about 6 months ago, shortly after Jennifer had packed up her things and left their modest townhouse in Silver Lake. She'd taken most of the furniture, half of their savings, and all of the couple friends they'd accumulated over their 12-year marriage. What she'd left behind was a 42-year-old man with thinning hair, a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie, and a crushing awareness of his own irrelevance. "Did you hear about Ethan?" The voices carried across the cubicle walls with that particular tone people use when they want to be overheard. "The divorce? God, I'm not surprised. Can you imagine being married to that? I heard she left him for a personal trainer, someone with actual personality. Probably someone who doesn't spend Friday nights color-coding spreadsheets." Ethan had learned to tune it out, the way you learn to ignore traffic noise or the hum of an air conditioner. But some days, the words found their way through his carefully constructed defenses, settling somewhere deep in his chest where they collected like sediment. Friday afternoon arrived with the weight of a small blessing. Sophie would be spending the weekend with Jennifer, a custody arrangement that Ethan had agreed to despite the way it hollowed out his weekends. He told himself it was good for Sophie to have time with her mother. He didn't tell himself that the empty townhouse made him feel like a ghost haunting his own life. He was packing up his desk at 5:47 p.m., right on schedule, when Derek Matheson appeared at his cubicle entrance. Derek was everything Ethan wasn't: tall, athletic, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having been rejected by anything or anyone in his 31 years of life. He worked in client relations, a department that seemed to measure success by how many expensive lunches one could expense. "Parker," Derek's voice boomed with false enthusiasm. "Big plans tonight?" Ethan looked up, his hand frozen on his laptop case. Derek never talked to him. None of them did, unless they needed something. "Just heading home," Ethan said carefully. "Home? On a Friday night?" Derek leaned against the cubicle wall with studied casualness. "Come on, man. That's depressing even for you." The insult landed with the weight of a pebble, small, but enough to sting. Ethan forced something approximating a smile. "Yeah, well, early start tomorrow." "Doing what? Organizing your sock drawer?" Behind Derek, Ethan could see others gathering. Marcus from IT, his perpetual smirk already in place. Vanessa and Kelly from HR, their expressions bright with barely concealed amusement. Brad from the executive floor, slumming it with the regular employees. This wasn't random. They'd coordinated this. "Actually," Derek continued, "we're all heading to Rousseau's for dinner. You should come." Rousseau's. Ethan knew the name, an upscale French restaurant downtown, the kind of place where appetizers cost more than his usual grocery budget. The kind of place he and Jennifer had talked about going to for their anniversary, but never quite managed. "I don't think," Ethan started. "Come on, Parker," Marcus cut in. stepping closer. Don't be antisocial. We're trying to include you here. Include. The word tasted like poison wrapped in sugar. We feel bad, Vanessa added, her voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. You've been through so much lately, with the divorce and everything. You shouldn't be alone on a Friday night. There it was, the divorce. His failure, now public property, repackaged as concern. Ethan's instinct screamed at him to refuse, to make up an excuse, to retreat into the safety of his empty townhouse, where at least the silence was honest. But something in their faces, the eager anticipation, the barely suppressed laughter lurking behind their eyes, sparked something in him. Pride, maybe. Or just exhaustion with his own cowardice. Sure, he heard himself say. Why not? The triumph in their expressions was immediate and unmistakable. They'd caught their prey. Excellent! Derek clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to hurt. We've got a reservation for 7. You can ride with us. The drive to Rousseau's took 23 minutes, though it felt like hours. Ethan sat in the back of Derek's BMW, wedged between Marcus and Brad, while Vanessa and Kelly occupied the front seats, their perfume mixing into something cloying and suffocating. The conversation flowed around him, inside jokes about people he barely knew, references to after-work drinks he'd never been invited to, discussions of weekend plans that highlighted just how completely separate his life was from theirs. So Parker, Brad said, his voice carrying that edge of false interest, back in the dating game yet? The car fell silent, everyone waiting for his response. Not really, Ethan managed. Why not? Kelly turned in her seat, her eyes wide with performed curiosity. You're a catch. Divorced, single dad, decent job. What more could a woman want? The laughter that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Leave him alone, Vanessa said, though her smile suggested she was enjoying this. Dating after divorce is hard, especially at his age. His age. 42. Ancient, apparently. My sister's single, Marcus offered. But she's only 28. Probably too young for you, right, Parker? You'd want someone more age-appropriate. Someone who's also given up on life. More laughter. Ethan stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, and wondered what exactly he'd agreed to. Rousseau's occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, the kind of calculated authenticity that cost a fortune to achieve. The host recognized Derek immediately. Apparently, he was a regular, and led them through the crowded dining room to a large round table near the windows. The table was set for 8. Ethan counted the people in their party. 7. Expecting someone else? He asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Oh, right. Derek snapped his fingers like he'd just remembered. Yeah, actually, someone's joining us a bit later. The way he said it, the glances exchanged around the table, the barely suppressed smiles, they all confirmed what Ethan's gut had been telling him since Derek first appeared at his cubicle. This wasn't dinner. This was something else. They ordered drinks. Ethan asked for water. Derek insisted he have wine. Come on, Parker. Live a little. When's the last time you had fun? The question didn't require an answer, which was fortunate because Ethan didn't have one. He accepted the wine glass, a Pinot Noir that probably cost more than his electric bill, and took a small sip. It tasted like ashes. The conversation continued around him, voices rising and falling, laughter erupting at intervals. They talked about work, about weekend plans, about a company retreat scheduled for next month that Ethan hadn't known existed. He was at the table, but not of it, a spectator to his own humiliation. Vanessa checked her phone and smiled. She's on her way. Who? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer would be evasive. You'll see, Kelly said, her eyes gleaming. We thought you might enjoy some company. The word hung in the air, pregnant with implication. Marcus leaned back in his chair, wine glass dangling from his fingers. We know it's been rough, Parker. The divorce, being alone. We wanted to do something nice for you. Something nice, Ethan repeated slowly. Yeah. Derek's enthusiasm felt like a weapon. Set you up with someone, get you back out there. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. This wasn't just dinner. They'd arranged a blind date. For him. Without asking, without his consent. They'd packaged his loneliness into entertainment, his divorce into a setup for their amusement. "You set me up," Ethan said, his voice flat. "Come on, don't sound so suspicious," Brad laughed. "We're doing you a favor." "You didn't think to ask me first?" "If we'd asked, you would have said no," Vanessa pointed out, as if this logic justified everything. "You would have made excuses and gone home to your empty house. This way, you have to at least try." "Have to," Ethan echoed. The words tasted bitter. This whole evening, the invitation, the ride, the expensive restaurant, it had all been designed to trap him here, to ensure he couldn't escape whatever humiliation they'd planned. His phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer. "Running late picking up Sophie. Will be there by 8. He typed back, "No problem." At least Sophie wouldn't see him like this, sitting at a table full of people who viewed him as a joke, waiting for a punchline to arrive in human form. "Don't look so terrified," Kelly said, reaching across the table to pat his hand. The gesture was condescending, the kind of touch you'd give a frightened child. "She's actually really nice." "Nice," Marcus snorted. "That's one way to put it." Derek shot him a look that was meant to be subtle, but landed with the grace of a sledgehammer. "She's perfect for you, Parker. Trust us." Perfect for him. Ethan's imagination conjured possibilities, each worse than the last. Someone desperate. Someone they'd found online, maybe paid to show up. Someone chosen specifically because she'd make him look pathetic, because the mismatch would be obvious and cruel and funny to everyone except him. The waiter appeared to take their orders. Ethan chose something at random. He couldn't taste anything anyway. His mouth had gone dry with dread. Around the table, his coworkers ordered appetizers to share, expensive entrees, another bottle of wine. They were settling in, getting comfortable. This was going to be a show, and they'd purchased front row seats. "What did you tell her about me?" Ethan asked quietly. Derek's smile widened. "The truth? That you're a nice guy going through a divorce, looking to meet someone? And what did you tell her about herself? Why she should have dinner with a complete stranger?" "We told her you were successful," Vanessa said. "Stable. Good father. All true, technically." "Technically," Ethan repeated. Everything about this evening was technically something. Technically an invitation. Technically an attempt at kindness. Technically not kidnapping, even though they'd driven him here, and he had no way to leave. His hand moved to his phone, considering options. He could call a rideshare, make an excuse, leave before this mystery woman arrived, but that would give them what they wanted too. The story of how Ethan Parker was so pathetic, he couldn't even handle a blind date, how he'd run away rather than face a woman. No. If they wanted a show, he'd give them one. He'd sit here, meet whoever they dredged up, be polite for exactly as long as socially required, and then leave with whatever dignity he could salvage. He'd learned to endure worse than this. Marriage to someone who'd grown to despise him had taught him endurance, at least. The appetizers arrived. Oysters, he realized with bitter irony. Aphrodisiacs. The jokes wrote themselves. "So, Parker," Brad said, spearing an oyster with unnecessary aggression. "What's your type? Brunette? Blonde? Redhead?" "Human," Ethan said quietly. "My type is human." The table erupted in laughter as if he'd told the funniest joke in history. He hadn't meant it as a joke. Marcus wiped his eyes. "Low standards. Smart, given your situation." "My situation," Ethan said. "You know, divorced, kid, not exactly swimming in options." Kelly jumped in, her voice bright with false positivity. "But that's changing tonight. New chapter. Fresh start. All those cliches actually happening." Vanessa checked her phone again. 10 minutes out. 10 minutes. Ethan took a larger sip of wine, then another. The alcohol did nothing to calm his nerves, but at least it gave his hands something to do. "Don't drink too much," Derek cautioned. "You want to make a good impression." "Right," Ethan said. "Good impression. At the dinner I didn't know was a date, with a woman I've never met, arranged by people who think I'm a joke." The truth landed on the table like a grenade. For a moment, actual silence fell. Then Derek laughed, but it sounded forced. "Come on, Parker, don't be so dramatic. We're trying to help." "Are you?" Ethan met his eyes directly for the first time all evening. "Is that what this is?" "What else would it be?" Vanessa's voice had an edge now, defensive. Ethan could say it. He could lay out exactly what he knew this was: entertainment, humiliation, a story they'd tell for months about poor, pathetic Ethan and his disaster of a blind date. But what would be the point? They'd deny it, gaslight him, make him feel crazy for seeing malice in their supposed kindness. "Nothing," he said finally. "I'm sure you're right. I'm just nervous." The tension broke. They were back on script, back in their roles. Ethan, the grateful victim, them the benevolent saviors. Marcus started a story about a disastrous date he'd been on, a story Ethan suspected was fabricated or heavily embellished, designed to make him feel better by comparison. The others chimed in with their own dating horror stories, each more exaggerated than the last. Look, their stories seemed to say, dating is hard for everyone. You're not special in your suffering. But their stories ended with laughter, with lessons learned, with eventual success. They were stories with happy endings, or at least hopeful ones. Ethan suspected his story would end differently. Vanessa's phone lit up. She glanced at it and her smile turned sharp. "She's here." The table went quiet again, all eyes turning toward the entrance. Ethan forced himself not to look, not to give them the satisfaction of seeing his anxiety. Instead, he studied his wine glass, the dark red liquid catching the Edison bulb light, turning it into something that looked like blood. "Oh my God," Kelly breathed. That made Ethan look up. The restaurant had gone quiet, or maybe that was just his perception narrowing to a single point. A woman stood at the host stand speaking to the maitre d', and every head in the dining room had turned to watch her. She was beautiful. Not conventionally beautiful in the way of magazines or movies, but striking in a way that demanded attention. Tall, maybe 5'10", with dark skin that seemed to absorb and reflect the warm lighting simultaneously. She wore a deep blue dress that was somehow both elegant and simple, nothing ostentatious but clearly expensive. Her hair was natural, cut close to her head in a way that emphasized the sharp lines of her face. But it was her presence that filled the room, the way she stood, the way she moved, the way she seemed completely comfortable being the center of attention. This was the joke? Ethan's mind raced, trying to understand the angle. Maybe she was an actress they'd hired. Maybe this was the setup. She'd sit down, they'd have a conversation, and then at some crucial moment she'd reveal it was all fake, all for show. That would be the punchline. Not that she was beneath him, but that someone like her would never genuinely be interested in someone like him. The woman spoke to the host, who gestured toward their table. She followed his indication, and her eyes swept across their group, landing on Ethan with an intensity that made his breath catch. She knew. Somehow, she already knew. She approached the table with measured steps, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Up close, Ethan could see she was older than he'd first thought, probably close to his own age, with fine lines at the corners of her eyes that suggested a life fully lived. She wore minimal jewelry, just small gold hoops in her ears and a simple watch that Ethan recognized as expensive despite his limited knowledge of such things. "Good evening," she said, her voice low and controlled. "I'm Naomi Brooks." Derek jumped up, pulling out the empty chair, the one next to Ethan, of course. "Naomi, great to finally meet you in person. I'm Derek, this is Marcus, Brad, Vanessa, Kelly, and this," he gestured with theatrical flourish, "is Ethan Parker." Naomi's eyes settled on Ethan again. There was something in her gaze he couldn't quite read. Assessment, maybe, or calculation. "Mr. Parker," she said, extending her hand. Ethan stood awkwardly, knocking his knee against the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. He shook her hand. Her grip was firm, confident, her skin warm. "Just Ethan," he managed. "Please." "Ethan," she repeated, as if testing the name. Then she sat, movements graceful and deliberate, and Ethan sank back into his own chair, hyper-aware of how close she was, how he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that reminded him of jasmine. "So," Vanessa's voice was too loud, too bright. "Naomi, tell us about yourself." Naomi accepted a wine glass from the waiter with a small nod of thanks. "What would you like to know?" "Oh, everything." Kelly leaned forward. "What do you do? Where are you from? How did you end up on—" She stopped herself, recalibrating. "How did you end up joining us tonight?" Naomi took a sip of wine before answering, letting the silence stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. I'm an architect. I moved to the city about 3 years ago for a position at Morrison and Associates. We specialize in sustainable commercial design. As for tonight, she glanced at Derek with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. I was told I'd be meeting someone interesting. The emphasis on told was slight but unmistakable. She hadn't chosen this. She'd been recruited, just like him. And Ethan here is definitely interesting, Marcus jumped in, his grin predatory. Right, Parker? Tell her about yourself. All eyes turned to Ethan. This was it, the moment he was supposed to perform, to justify his presence, to prove he deserved to sit next to this woman who was so clearly out of his league. I'm an accountant, Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. I work at Morton and Associates. I have a daughter, Sophie, she's 7. The words hung in the air, inadequate and small. This was his life, reduced to census data. Sophie, Naomi repeated. That's a lovely name. Thank you. Another silence, this one excruciating. Ethan could feel his coworkers' amusement, could practically hear their thoughts. This is exactly what we expected. Awkward silence and painful small talk. Do you have children? Ethan asked, then immediately regretted it. What if she couldn't? What if that was a painful subject? What if... No, Naomi said simply. Never quite found the right situation for it. Marriage, children, they require a level of certainty I've never felt. Oh, Ethan knows all about marriage, Brad said, his tone jovial but his words pointed. Just got divorced, actually, fresh on the market. Ethan wanted to sink through the floor. They told her he was divorced, obviously, but the way Brad phrased it, like Ethan was a used car being sold at a discount, made his skin crawl. Naomi's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. I'm sorry, she said, and it sounded genuine. Divorce is difficult. It was for the best, Ethan said automatically, the same line he'd been feeding everyone for 6 months. We wanted different things. She wanted someone who wasn't boring, Marcus Stage whispered to Kelly, loud enough for everyone to hear. The laughter that followed felt like knives. Ethan's hands clenched under the table, nails digging into his palms. This was it. This was the evening in miniature. Him, exposed and humiliated, while they laughed and Naomi sat there witnessing his complete inadequacy. But when he glanced at Naomi, she wasn't laughing. She was watching Marcus with an expression that could freeze water. That was rude, she said quietly. Marcus blinked, his smile faltering. What? What you just said. About Ethan. It was rude. The table went still. No one seemed to know how to respond to this deviation from the script. I was just joking, Marcus said defensively. We joke around. It's fine. Right, Parker? All eyes turned to Ethan again. This was his chance to smooth things over, to laugh it off, to be a good sport. That's what they expected. That's what he always did. Right, Ethan heard himself say. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. And from the way Naomi was looking at him now, she knew it wasn't fine. The waiter appeared to take Naomi's order, providing a brief reprieve. She ordered the duck, decisive, no hesitation, and another uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Derek, ever the master of false cheer, tried to restart the conversation. So, Naomi, how did you hear about us? About tonight. A friend, Naomi said carefully. She thought I might enjoy meeting new people. And are you? Kelly asked. Enjoying it? Naomi's eyes swept across the table, landing on each person briefly before returning to Ethan. The evening is young. It was a diplomatic non-answer, but something in her tone suggested she'd already made up her mind about most of the people present. Vanessa jumped in with a story about a renovation project, clearly trying to find common ground with an architect. Naomi listened politely, asked appropriate questions, but Ethan could sense her attention was elsewhere. Every few moments, her eyes would flick to him, assessing, calculating something he couldn't understand. The entrees arrived. Ethan's looked expensive and unappetizing. He pushed it around his plate, taking small bites when he remembered to eat. Across from him, Derek was telling some story about a client meeting, his voice loud with alcohol and self-importance. The others laughed at the appropriate moments, performing engagement while their real attention stayed fixed on Ethan and Naomi. This was the show they'd paid for, watching Ethan squirm through an evening with a woman they'd chosen specifically to highlight his inadequacy. He could feel it in every glance, every barely suppressed smile, every too loud laugh. "So, Ethan," Brad said, dragging his name out like taffy, "tell Naomi about your hobbies. What do you do for fun?" Fun. The word felt foreign. What did he do for fun? He worked. He took care of Sophie. He fell asleep on the couch watching cooking shows he'd never actually make. He existed, barely, in the spaces between responsibilities. "I read," he said finally, "and I helped Sophie with her art projects." "Reading," Marcus repeated, like it was the most boring answer imaginable. "What kind of books?" "Mystery, mostly. Sometimes history." "Fascinating," Derek said in a tone that meant exactly the opposite. But Naomi leaned forward slightly. "What are you reading now?" "A book about the Gilded Age," Ethan said. "Industrial barons and labor movements." "Sounds stimulating," she said, and unlike Derek, she seemed to mean it. "I'm reading a biography of Julia Morgan right now, the architect. She designed Hearst Castle." "I know who Julia Morgan is," Ethan said, then worried he'd sounded defensive. But Naomi smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all evening. "Of course you do. Sorry, I'm used to people not knowing architectural history." "My daughter did a school project on famous buildings last year," Ethan explained. "Julia Morgan came up. We watched a documentary together." "That's wonderful," Naomi said, and he could tell she meant it. Getting children interested in architecture young. Did she enjoy it? "She mostly liked the castle," Ethan admitted. "But she learned about how Morgan was the first woman licensed as an architect in California, how she designed over 700 buildings despite all the discrimination she faced. Sophie found that inspiring." For a moment, it was just the two of them talking, the rest of the table fading into background noise. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, not quite hope, but at least a brief respite from the crushing anxiety that had dominated the evening. Then Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smirked, and showed the screen to Kelly, who covered her laugh with her hand. The moment shattered. Naomi noticed. Her expression shifted back to that careful neutrality, but Ethan could see the calculation in her eyes. She was figuring something out, putting pieces together. "Excuse me," she said, rising gracefully. "I need to use the restroom." She walked away, and the moment she was out of earshot, the table exploded with whispered commentary. "Oh my God," Kelly hissed. "She's amazing. How did we get her to come?" "Jessica from my gym," Vanessa explained. "She knows Naomi from some professional thing. I told her we had this sad divorced guy who needed help getting back out there." "And she believed you?" Marcus laughed. "Did you show her a picture?" "I may have used an old photo of Parker," Derek admitted, "from like 5 years ago, before he completely let himself go." The words hit Ethan like physical blows. They'd lied to her. They'd used an outdated photo from back when he still had hair, before stress and single parenthood had added 15 pounds and deepened the lines around his eyes. They'd tricked her into coming here, just like they'd tricked him. "This is perfect," Brad was saying. "She's way too good for him. The contrast is hilarious." "Did you see his face when she walked in?" Kelly dissolved into giggles. "He looked like he was going to pass out." "Best part is she's being nice to him," Marcus added. "Professional courtesy or whatever, making him think he has a chance. It's brutal." Ethan's vision tunneled. His hands were shaking. This whole evening, every word, every gesture, every moment of seeming connection had been orchestrated for their amusement. Naomi was the punchline, but he was the joke. "You think she knows?" Vanessa asked. "Knows what?" "That this is a setup. That we're just messing with him." "Probably suspects," Derek said. "But she's classy. She'll play along until she can make an exit." "How long do you think until she bails?" "I give it 20 minutes after she gets back from the bathroom." "I say 15. She seems smart." They were placing bets on how long Naomi would tolerate sitting next to him, on when his humiliation would be complete. Something inside Ethan cracked. Not broke. He'd been broken for months, maybe years. But cracked, like ice under pressure, like a dam beginning to fail. He'd spent 6 months being invisible, being the office joke, accepting their mockery as the price of employment. He'd smiled through Jennifer's affair, through the divorce proceedings, through the whispers and the pitying looks. He'd made himself small, forgettable, harmless. And this was his reward, being used as entertainment, his loneliness packaged into an evening's amusement. Naomi returned to the table, her expression unreadable. She'd taken a phone call, Ethan could tell. Her hand still held her phone, and there was a tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She sat down, and for a moment, she just looked at him. Really looked at him, in a way that made Ethan feel like she could see every thought in his head, every wound on his soul. "Ethan?" she said quietly, her voice pitched low enough that only he could hear beneath the general conversation. "Did you know about this?" The question hung between them. He could lie. He could protect himself, claim ignorance, try to salvage something from this wreckage. "Know about what?" he asked instead. Naomi's jaw tightened. "I just spoke to my friend Jessica. She told me some interesting things about how this evening was arranged." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Naomi, But before he could finish, Derek's voice cut across the table. "Everything okay over there, lovebirds?" The word lovebirds dripped with mockery. Around the table, the others were barely containing their laughter, watching him and Naomi like spectators at a particularly entertaining accident. Naomi turned to face Derek, and something in her expression made Ethan's breath catch. Gone was the careful neutrality, the professional courtesy. What remained was something cold and sharp and utterly controlled. "Actually," Naomi said, her voice carrying clearly across the table, "I have a question." The conversation died. Everyone turned to look at her. "Did you arrange this evening as a joke?" The silence that followed was absolute. Derek's smile flickered, uncertain for the first time all evening. "What?" "No, we were just what?" Naomi's voice was calm, almost conversational, which made it more devastating. "Setting up your coworker with someone you considered appropriate? Or did you think it would be funny to watch him fail?" "Naomi, I think you're misunderstanding," Vanessa started. "I spoke to Jessica," Naomi interrupted. "She told me exactly what you said when you asked her to connect us. That you had this pathetic divorced guy who was so lonely, it was sad. That you wanted to do something nice, but also that it would be hilarious to watch." The color drained from Vanessa's face. Around the table, the others shifted uncomfortably, their entertainment souring into something uglier. "She also mentioned," Naomi continued, her eyes moving to Derek, "that you sent her a photo of Ethan, an old one, from before his divorce. Which is interesting because the man sitting next to me looks quite different from that photo. Almost like you were afraid I wouldn't come if I knew what he actually looked like." Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Naomi turned to Ethan, and her expression softened infinitesimally. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know. If I had known they were using you like this, I never would have come." The words should have been comforting, but they cut deeper than any of the others' mockery, because they confirmed what Ethan had suspected all along, that without the deception, without the old photo and the carefully crafted story, she never would have agreed to this. That the real him, the current him, wasn't worth her time. But before despair could fully settle in, something else cut through. A spark of anger, bright and hot and unfamiliar. They'd used both of them. They'd lied to Naomi, manipulated her into coming here, and then planned to laugh at her kindness and his desperation. This wasn't just about humiliating him anymore. They'd turned Naomi into an unwitting participant in their cruel little game. Ethan stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, loud in the stunned silence. "Excuse me," he said, his voice shaking but audible. "I need to say something." 7 pairs of eyes fixed on him, 6 wary, 1 curious. "I've worked with most of you for years," Ethan began. "Some of you I've known since you started at the firm. I've helped you with projects, covered for you when you were late, listened to your problems. I thought we were colleagues, maybe not friends, but at least decent to each other." "Ethan, come on," Marcus tried. "I'm not finished." The words came out harder than Ethan intended, but he didn't stop. "For 6 months, you've watched my life fall apart. My marriage ended. My wife left me for someone else. I'm raising my daughter alone and trying not to let her see how much I'm struggling, and you've turned it all into a joke." "We didn't," Kelly started. "You did." Ethan's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady now, powered by months of accumulated grief and rage. You whisper about me at work. You laugh about my divorce. You make fun of how I spend my weekends, like being a single father is pathetic. And tonight, you decided to take it further. You set up this whole evening, brought in someone you thought was too good for me, just so you could watch me fail. Just so you could have another story to tell, another reason to laugh. The restaurant had gone quiet around them. Other diners were watching now, their own conversations abandoned in favor of this unexpected drama. And you know what the worst part is? Ethan continued. I knew this was a trap from the moment Derek showed up at my desk. Every instinct told me not to come. But I came anyway because some small, stupid part of me hoped I was wrong. That maybe, just maybe, you actually gave a damn about me. Vanessa had tears in her eyes, but Ethan couldn't tell if they were genuine remorse or just embarrassment at being called out publicly. Ethan, we were trying to help, she whispered. Help? The word came out like a bark of laughter. You were trying to help by lying to both of us? By using an old photo to trick Naomi into coming? By sitting here taking bets on when she'd leave? That's not help. That's cruelty. He turned to Naomi, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I'm sorry, he said to her. You got dragged into this because they thought it would be funny. You deserve better than that. You deserve better than sitting here listening to them use both of us as entertainment. Naomi stood up slowly, and for a moment Ethan thought she was going to leave. He wouldn't blame her. But instead she moved closer to him, standing shoulder to shoulder, a united front against the table. They do this to you regularly? She asked quietly. Every day, Ethan admitted. In small ways, this is just the most elaborate version. Naomi nodded once, sharply, as if confirming something to herself. Then she turned back to the table. I'm going to stay, she announced. Derek blinked. What? I'm going to stay and have dinner with Ethan. The dinner I was promised, a chance to meet someone interesting. Because unlike all of you who think cruelty is a form of bonding, I'm actually curious about the man sitting next to me. The real man, not the pathetic caricature you've created. She sat back down, her movements deliberate, and picked up her wine glass. Ethan, stunned, slowly lowered himself back into his chair. You don't have to, he started. I want to, Naomi said firmly. Then, louder. Unless the rest of you would like to leave, since this clearly isn't the evening you planned. The challenge hung in the air. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Derek threw his napkin on the table. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Is it? Naomi's voice was sharp. What's ridiculous? Being called out for bullying a colleague, or the fact that your entire entertainment strategy revolves around making someone feel small? We weren't, Vanessa tried again. You were, Ethan said quietly. You are. Brad was the first to move, pushing back from the table with enough force to make the silverware rattle. His face had gone red, whether from anger or embarrassment, Ethan couldn't tell. I don't need to sit here and be insulted, Brad said, reaching for his wallet. Then don't, Naomi replied coolly. The door is right there. For a moment, it seemed like Brad might actually leave. His hand hovered over his wallet, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. But then Derek caught his arm. Sit down, Derek said quietly. Don't let them make this into something it's not. Them. As if Ethan and Naomi were the problem, as if calling out cruelty was worse than the cruelty itself. Brad sat, but the atmosphere at the table had shifted irreversibly. The easy camaraderie, the shared jokes at Ethan's expense, all of it had curdled into something tense and bitter. The other diners had returned to their own meals, but Ethan could feel their stolen glances, their whispered speculation about what drama had just unfolded. Kelly cleared her throat, attempting to salvage something from the wreckage. Look, I think we all just need to calm down. There's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Naomi's question was surgical in its precision. Please, explain what I've misunderstood. Because from where I'm sitting, you invited a coworker to dinner under false pretenses, arranged a blind date without his consent, and spent the evening making jokes at his expense. Which part of that did I get wrong? Kelly's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. Marcus tried a different approach, his voice taking on a reasoning tone that set Ethan's teeth on edge. We've known Parker for years. This is just how we interact. Right, Parker? Tell her this is normal. The weight of expectation pressed down on Ethan's shoulders. This was the moment where he was supposed to laugh it off, to minimize his own hurt feelings, to make them comfortable with their cruelty by pretending it didn't matter. He'd done it 100 times before. 1,000. No, Ethan said. The word came out stronger than he expected. This isn't normal. Or maybe it is for you, but it shouldn't be. Vanessa's perfectly manicured hand reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of touching Ethan's. We really were trying to help, she said, and for the first time that evening she sounded almost genuine. Maybe we went about it the wrong way, but we thought you needed to get back out there, that you were lonely. I am lonely, Ethan admitted, and the honesty of it felt like stripping naked in the middle of the restaurant. I'm incredibly lonely. My daughter is the only person I talk to outside of work, and she's 7. Most days, I go home to an empty house and watch television until I fall asleep on the couch. I eat dinner standing at the counter because it seems pointless to set the table for one person. I am deeply, profoundly lonely. The confession hung in the air. Vanessa's eyes were definitely wet now, and even Kelly looked uncomfortable. But you know what's worse than being lonely? Ethan continued. Being reminded every single day that the people around you think you deserve it, that your loneliness is funny to them, that your pain is entertainment. We don't think that, Vanessa whispered. Don't you? Ethan met her eyes. Then why did you laugh when Marcus said my ex-wife left me because I was boring? Why did Derek bet on how long Naomi would stay before she got tired of me? Why did you use an old photo instead of telling her the truth? Silence answered him, the kind of silence that confirmed everything. Naomi picked up her fork and cut into her duck with deliberate precision. The gesture was almost aggressive in its normalcy, a refusal to let their discomfort derail the evening further. This duck is excellent, she said conversationally. Ethan, how's your meal? Ethan looked down at his plate. He'd barely touched the salmon, and what he had eaten sat like lead in his stomach. It's good, he managed. Just good? Naomi raised an eyebrow. For $48, it should be better than good. Despite everything, Ethan felt the corner of his mouth twitch. It's very good, possibly the best salmon I've ever had. That's more like it. Naomi took a sip of wine. I find it's important to appreciate quality when you encounter it. Life's too short for mediocre food and bad company. The implication landed like a thrown gauntlet. Around the table, Ethan's co-workers shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their own meals. Derek made one more attempt at control. Look, clearly we've gotten off on the wrong foot tonight. Why don't we just what? Naomi interrupted. Pretend the last hour didn't happen. Go back to the script you'd written where I politely endured dinner and then made an excuse to leave early? Sorry, but I don't perform in plays I didn't audition for. No one's asking you to perform, Derek said, his charm finally showing cracks of irritation. We're just trying to have a nice dinner. Are you? Naomi set down her fork with careful precision. Because, from what I observed, you were trying to have a nice dinner at Ethan's expense. There's a difference. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. You're taking this way too seriously. It was just supposed to be fun. Fun for whom? Ethan asked. The question surprised him. He hadn't planned to speak again, to keep engaging with their justifications. But something about sitting next to Naomi, about having someone in his corner for the first time in months, made him braver than he'd been in years. It wasn't fun for me. I don't think it was fun for Naomi, so who exactly was this fun for? We had good intentions, Kelly insisted. We thought you'd actually hit it off, that maybe this could turn into something real. Naomi laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. You thought we'd hit it off? Is that why you told your friend I'd be meeting a pathetic divorced guy? Because nothing says potential romance like pity and mockery. Kelly's face flushed. I didn't say that. Vanessa did. Does it matter who said it? Ethan asked quietly. You all thought it. You all agreed to it. You all sat here laughing about it. Vanessa opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. What could she say? They'd all heard the conversation, the bets, the casual cruelty of people who'd forgotten or never learned. that their entertainment came at the cost of someone's dignity. The waiter appeared, his professional smile faltering as he took in the tension radiating from their table. "Is everything satisfactory?" he asked, his eyes darting between faces like he was trying to determine who to address. "Everything is perfect," Naomi said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "In fact, could you bring us the dessert menu? I think Ethan and I would like to see what else your kitchen does well." The waiter nodded, clearly relieved to have a concrete task, and disappeared. "You're really staying?" Brad asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "Why wouldn't I?" Naomi turned to Ethan. "Unless you'd prefer I leave, I don't want to make assumptions about what you want." It was a genuine question, Ethan realized. Despite her fierce defense of him, despite her obvious anger at his coworkers, she was giving him the choice. She wasn't staying out of pity or obligation, but because she wanted to, and only if he wanted her to. "I'd like you to stay," Ethan said, "if you're sure." "I'm sure," Naomi's expression softened. "Besides, I'm genuinely curious about that Julia Morgan documentary you mentioned. Did your daughter end up building anything inspired by it?" The shift in conversation was so abrupt that it took Ethan a moment to catch up. Yes, actually. She built a model of Hearst Castle out of popsicle sticks and cardboard. Took her 3 weeks. It's still in our living room because I can't bring myself to take it down. 3 weeks is serious dedication for a 7-year-old, Naomi said. My attention span at that age lasted about 45 minutes. Sophie's always been focused when she cares about something, Ethan said, and felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest, the feeling he got whenever he talked about his daughter. She wanted every tower perfect, every window in the right place. I helped with the cutting, but the design was all hers. Sounds like she might have inherited your attention to detail. Maybe, or maybe she just likes building things. They were talking, actually talking, about real things, important things, and around them the rest of the table sat in stunned silence, watching their plan dissolve into something they hadn't anticipated. Derek tried once more to insert himself into the conversation. That's sweet, Parker, really, but maybe we should... Derek, Naomi said without looking at him. I'm having a conversation with Ethan. If you'd like to have your own conversation, I suggest you talk to the people at your end of the table. The dismissal was absolute. Derek's face went through several shades of red before settling on a mottled purple. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder, a silent suggestion to let it go. Ethan watched it happen, the moment his coworkers realized they'd lost control of the narrative. They'd brought Naomi here as a prop in their comedy, and she'd refused to play along. More than that, she'd flipped the script entirely, turning their joke into her evening with Ethan, relegating them to spectators in a show they no longer directed. The waiter returned with dessert menus, which Naomi accepted with a gracious smile. Thank you. Also, I think we'd like separate checks for this end of the table. The waiter glanced at Derek, who'd been the de facto host all evening, then back at Naomi. Of course, ma'am. I'll arrange that. Wait, Derek said. We always split the check as a group. Not tonight, Naomi said firmly. Ethan and I will cover our own meals. I don't think any of us want the complication of shared expenses after this evening. It was a small thing splitting the check, but it carried symbolic weight. They weren't a group anymore. The pretense of collegiality, of this being a friendly dinner among coworkers, had been thoroughly demolished. Kelly whispered something to Vanessa, who nodded and stood up. Actually, I think I'm going to head out, Vanessa said, her voice small. I have an early morning tomorrow. It was barely 8 o'clock. No one believed the excuse, but no one challenged it either. I'll come with you, Kelly said quickly. We can share a ride. They gathered their things, purses, phones, the detritus of an evening gone wrong, and departed with mumbled goodbyes that Ethan barely heard. Their exit left 4 at the table. Ethan, Naomi, Derek, and Marcus, with Brad looking like he desperately wanted to follow, but couldn't quite muster the courage to abandon ship. The waiter cleared the empty spaces, removing wine glasses and plates with practiced efficiency. The table felt larger now, the distance between Ethan's end and Derek's suddenly vast. Naomi studied the dessert menu with the same focused attention she'd given to the conversation. The creme brulee looks excellent, she said, though I'm also tempted by the chocolate torte. What about you? Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd ordered dessert at a restaurant. Jennifer had always been watching her weight, and by extension his. Dessert had been something they shared maybe twice a year, on special occasions, and even then it came with a side of guilt. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "What would you recommend?" "Bold of you to assume I'm an expert on French desserts," Naomi said with a slight smile. "But if you're genuinely asking, I'd say the profiteroles. They're simple, but when done well, they're perfect." Profiteroles it is. When the waiter returned, they ordered profiteroles for Ethan, creme brulee for Naomi, and coffee for both. Derek and Marcus ordered nothing, just sat there nursing the last of their wine, watching like they couldn't quite believe what was happening. "So," Naomi said once the waiter had left, "tell me about accounting. What made you choose that career?" It was such a normal question, the kind of thing people ask on actual first dates, that Ethan almost laughed. "Honestly, I'm good with numbers. They make sense in a way that people often don't. There's a right answer in accounting. Everything balances or it doesn't." "I can understand that," Naomi said. "Architecture is similar in some ways. Physics doesn't lie. If your calculations are wrong, the building falls down. Though I imagine architecture involves more creativity than balancing ledgers." "Maybe. But there's creativity in finding elegance in numbers too, isn't there? Making complex financial situations clear and understandable." Ethan blinked. No one had ever described his work as creative before. Necessary, sure. Boring, definitely. But creative? I never thought of it that way. "Most people don't think of what I do as creative either," Naomi said. "They think architecture is all artistic vision, but it's really about solving problems. How do you fit these functions into this space with this budget while meeting these codes and creating something that doesn't make people depressed to look at? It's puzzle solving with high stakes." "That actually sounds similar to tax law," Ethan said. "Finding the legal way to minimize liability while maximizing benefit. It's like a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape." "Exactly." Naomi's smile was genuine now, reaching her eyes. People think their jobs are boring because they've stopped seeing the complexity, or because everyone around them treats it as boring. The comment landed with precision. Ethan thought about years of Marcus's jokes about accounting being the most boring profession, of Kelly's exaggerated yawns when he talked about his projects, of the general dismissal of his work as something anyone could do with a calculator and no imagination. "My ex-wife thought my job was boring," Ethan said quietly. "She'd ask about my day and then zone out 30 seconds into my answer. Eventually, I stopped telling her anything meaningful." "That must have been lonely," Naomi said, "being married to someone who wasn't interested in what you spent most of your time doing." "It was." The admission came easier than Ethan expected. "But I convinced myself it was normal, that work was just work, and marriage was supposed to be about other things." "Was she interested in those other things?" Ethan considered the question. Had Jennifer been interested in him at all, by the end? Or had they both just been going through motions, staying together because leaving seemed harder? "I don't think so," he said finally. "I think we stayed together out of habit and fear. Fear of being alone, mostly." "And now you are alone," Naomi said. It wasn't a question or a judgment, just a statement of fact. "Now I'm alone," Ethan agreed, "which is terrifying in completely different ways." The desserts arrived, providing a natural break in the conversation. Ethan's profiteroles were arranged artfully on the plate, 3 perfect spheres drizzled with dark chocolate. Naomi's creme brulee had a perfect caramelized top that crackled satisfyingly when she tapped it with her spoon. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment, and Ethan marveled at how different this silence felt from the earlier ones. This wasn't the awkward quiet of strangers struggling for conversation or the loaded silence of waiting for a punchline. This was the peaceful silence of 2 people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. At the other end of the table, Marcus muttered something to Derek, who shook his head sharply. Brad was scrolling through his phone, probably texting Kelly and Vanessa about the disaster of the evening. "They're trying to figure out what went wrong," Naomi said, following Ethan's gaze. "They had a script, and we refused to follow it." "Do you think they really believed they were being kind?" Ethan asked. "Or was it always meant to be cruel?" Naomi considered this, taking another bite of her dessert before answering. "I think they believed both things at once, that they were doing you a favor while also finding the whole situation hilarious. People are good at holding contradictory ideas when it benefits them. That's a depressing worldview. Is it wrong, though? Ethan thought about Derek's enthusiastic invitation, Vanessa's sympathetic expression, Kelly's insistence that they were trying to help. Had any of it been genuine? Or had the kindness just been set dressing for the real entertainment, watching him squirm? No, he admitted. It's not wrong. I think that's exactly what they did. Convinced themselves they were being good people while setting up something designed to hurt. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Naomi quoted. Though in this case, I'm not sure the intentions were ever that good to begin with. Derek apparently couldn't take being ignored anymore. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. We're going to head out, he announced to no one in particular. Early meetings tomorrow. It was Friday night. No one had meetings on Saturday morning, but Ethan didn't point this out, just nodded. Marcus and Brad stood as well, gathering their things with obvious relief. The evening they'd planned, the entertainment they'd anticipated, had turned into something uncomfortable and confrontational. They wanted to escape, to regroup, to figure out how to spin this story in a way that didn't make them the villains. Parker, Derek said as they prepared to leave. Monday morning, my office. We need to talk. It sounded like a threat. It probably was a threat. Ethan had embarrassed Derek in front of a stranger, had refused to play along with their joke, had made them all look bad. There would be consequences. Fine, Ethan said. The word came out steadier than he felt. Monday was 2 days away. He'd worry about it then. Derek lingered for a moment, like he wanted to say more, but Naomi fixed him with a look that could freeze lava. He left, Marcus and Brad trailing behind him like loyal dogs following their pack leader. And then it was just the two of them at a table set for 8. The waiter appeared almost immediately to clear the abandoned places. Just the two of you now? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. Just the two of us, Naomi confirmed. Would you like to move to a smaller table, something more intimate? Naomi looked at Ethan, the question in her eyes. He nodded. The waiter led them to a corner table near the windows, away from the main dining room traffic. It was smaller, cozier, with a candle flickering between them and a view of the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Better? The waiter asked. Much better, Naomi said. Thank you. They settled into their new seats, and Ethan felt something shift. Away from the judgmental eyes of his coworkers, away from the performance they'd been expected to give, this actually felt like a date. Not the joke date that had been arranged, but something real and honest. Thank you, Ethan said once the waiter had left. Faye, for staying, for standing up for me, for all of it. You don't need to thank me, Naomi said. They were being cruel. Someone had to call them on it. Still, you could have left. Most people would have. I'm not most people. Naomi's smile was wry. And besides, I meant what I said. I am genuinely interested in getting to know you. The real you, not the caricature they created. What if the real me is boring? Ethan asked. What if they're right about that part? Ethan? Naomi waited until he met her eyes. In the last hour, you've talked about industrial barons, labor movements, Julia Morgan, sustainable architecture, the philosophy of accounting, raising a daughter alone, and the loneliness of divorce. You've stood up to a table full of people who wanted to humiliate you, admitted painful truths about your marriage, and showed more emotional honesty than I've encountered in months of supposedly authentic dates. If that's boring, then I need to recalibrate my definition of the word. Ethan felt his throat tighten. When was the last time someone had said something genuinely kind about him? Not the false sympathy of his coworkers or the dutiful affection of his daughter, but actual recognition of his worth as a person? I don't know what to say, he admitted. You don't have to say anything. Naomi finished her crème brûlée, scraping the last bit of caramel from the ramekin. But I do have a question. That confrontation with your coworkers, was that the first time you've pushed back like that? Ethan thought about the 6 months since his divorce, the years before that, all the small indignities he'd swallowed, all the jokes he'd laughed at, all the times he'd made himself smaller to make others comfortable. Yes, he said. That was the first time. How did it feel? Terrifying, liberating, Like jumping off a cliff and discovering you can fly, except you might also crash into the rocks below. Naomi laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. That's beautifully honest. Most people would just say it felt good. It did feel good, Ethan admitted. But it also felt dangerous. Derek's probably going to make my life hell at work now. Probably, Naomi agreed. But he was already making your life hell, wasn't he? Just in smaller, more socially acceptable ways. That's true. So what did you really lose? The comfort of knowing exactly what kind of hell to expect? Ethan considered this. She was right. His work environment had been toxic for months, maybe years. The casual mockery, the exclusion, the way they treated him like a joke. He'd accepted it as the price of keeping his job, of not making waves, of being professional. I'm not brave like you, Ethan said. That confrontation used up whatever courage I had stored up. I don't know if I can do it again. You don't have to be brave all the time, Naomi said. Sometimes you just have to be brave for 10 seconds, long enough to speak up, to set a boundary, to walk away. The rest takes care of itself. Is that how you live? God, no. Naomi's laugh was self-deprecating. I'm terrified most of the time. I just got good at not showing it. You seem incredibly confident. That's different from feeling confident. I learned early in my career that as a black woman in architecture, I couldn't afford to seem uncertain. Every hesitation was seen as incompetence, every question as ignorance, so I trained myself to seem sure even when I wasn't. That sounds exhausting. It is, Naomi admitted, but it's also survival. You do what you have to do. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared understanding settling between them. Two people who'd learned to make themselves smaller, to accommodate others' expectations, to survive in environments that didn't value them. Can I ask you something? Ethan said. Why did you really stay? It wasn't just because of what they did to me, was it? Naomi smiled, a complicated expression that held sadness and recognition. You want the honest answer? Always. I stayed because I saw myself in you, Naomi said quietly. The way you sat there trying to be polite while they mocked you. The way you made yourself smaller, hoping that would make it hurt less. I've done that. More times than I want to admit. And I thought, maybe if I could stand up for you, I'd be standing up for all the times I didn't stand up for myself. The confession hung between them, raw and real. Ethan realized that tonight hadn't just been about him. Naomi had her own wounds, her own history of being diminished and dismissed. The difference was that she'd learned to fight back while he was still learning. Thank you for telling me that, Ethan said. Thank you for asking. Naomi checked her watch. It's getting late. Do you need to get home to Sophie? She's with her mother this weekend, Ethan said, and felt the familiar emptiness that accompanied those words. I have nowhere I need to be. Neither do I. Naomi smiled. Want to walk? There's a park near here. We could continue this conversation somewhere that isn't a restaurant full of people trying not to eavesdrop on us. Ethan glanced around and realized she was right. Several nearby tables had clearly been following their drama all evening. The staff kept finding reasons to pass by their table, probably hoping for more entertainment. A walk sounds perfect, Ethan said. They paid their separate checks, Ethan wincing at the total but refusing to let it show, and stepped out into the cool evening air. The city had that particular quality it got on Friday nights, full of people determined to have fun, to make the most of their freedom from work. Music spilled from bars, laughter echoed from restaurant patios, and everywhere couples walked hand in hand, groups of friends moved in loud clusters. Ethan and Naomi walked side by side, not touching, but close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. The park was 3 blocks away, a small green space nestled between office buildings, lit by old-fashioned lampposts that created pools of warm light against the darkness. They found a bench overlooking a small fountain and sat, leaving appropriate space between them. The temperature had dropped, and Ethan saw Naomi shiver slightly. Here, he said, shrugging off his jacket. I'm fine. Please. My mother would disown me if I didn't offer. Naomi accepted the jacket with a small smile. Your mother taught you manners. She tried, not sure how well it took. You're doing fine. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fountain, listening to the distant sounds of the city. Ethan felt the adrenaline from the confrontation finally draining away, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion mixed with something else. Pride, maybe. Or just relief that it was over. "What happens on Monday?" Naomi asked. "I don't know. Derek will probably try to make an example of me. Or maybe he'll just make my life miserable in small ways until I quit." "Will you?" "Quit?" Ethan considered it. "I can't afford to. Not with Sophie's expenses and the divorce settlement. I need that job. There are other jobs. For a 42-year-old accountant with no special skills? Not many." "You're selling yourself short again," Naomi pointed out. "You have 15 years of experience, institutional knowledge, client relationships. That's valuable." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm exactly as replaceable as they think I am." Naomi turned to face him fully. "Ethan, can I give you some advice? From someone who spent too many years accepting less than she deserved? Please. Stop waiting for other people to value you. Start valuing yourself. Your coworkers treat you badly because you've shown them they can. Your ex-wife treated you badly for the same reason. At some point, you have to draw a line and say, 'This is unacceptable,' and mean it." "That's easy to say," Ethan said. "Harder to do when you're scared of being alone, of losing your job, of making things worse." "I know, but here's what I've learned. Things don't get better because you're patient or accommodating or nice. They get better when you decide you deserve better and start acting like it." "Is that what you did?" "Eventually. After wasting years trying to make people like me, trying to fit into spaces that were never designed for me." Naomi's voice held old pain. "I finally realized I'd rather be respected than liked, that I'd rather be alone than accommodate people who didn't value me." "And are you? Alone?" Naomi smiled sadly. "Most of the time, yes. Turns out being strong and independent and unwilling to compromise yourself doesn't make you popular in the dating world. Men say they want confident women, but what they really want is women who make them feel confident. There's a difference." "That's their loss," Ethan said, and meant it. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm difficult and demanding and impossible to please, like my last boyfriend said." "Was he worth pleasing?" Naomi laughed. "God, no. He wanted a decorative accessory who happened to have a successful career but didn't actually care about it. When I turned down a dinner invitation because of a work deadline, he accused me of being married to my job. When I did make dinner, he spent the whole time checking his phone. I couldn't win." "So you left?" "So I left. And he told everyone I was cold and career-obsessed and incapable of intimacy. Which maybe I am. But I'd rather be those things alone than compromise who I am for someone who doesn't even like the real me." They sat with that for a moment, two people scarred by relationships that had required them to diminish themselves. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan said. "Something I haven't admitted to anyone?" "Of course." "I'm relieved Jennifer left. I know I'm supposed to be devastated, and I was at first, but underneath the pain and the embarrassment and the fear, I'm relieved. Because I don't have to pretend anymore that I'm happy, that our marriage works, that I'm the person she wanted me to be." "That's not shameful," Naomi said gently. "That's honest. It feels shameful, like I failed at something I should have tried harder to fix. Or maybe you succeeded at recognizing when something was broken beyond repair. That takes courage too." Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd started the evening as a prop in someone else's cruel joke and had somehow become the most real thing that had happened to him in months. "How are you real, son?" he asked. "What?" "You, this, tonight. An hour ago I was sitting at that table waiting to be humiliated, and now I'm in a park having the most honest conversation I've had in years. How did that happen?" Naomi smiled. "Maybe we were both ready for honesty, or maybe your coworker's cruelty accidentally created something genuine. Ironic, if you think about it." "They'd hate that," Ethan said. "The idea that their joke backfired into something real. Good, let them hate it." A group of teenagers passed by, loud with youthful energy and the invincibility of Friday night. They didn't even glance at the two middle-aged people on the bench, and Ethan felt a strange gratitude for their invisibility. For this moment to be private, unobserved, just for them. "What time is it?" Naomi asked. Ethan checked his phone. "Almost 10. Sophie's probably asleep by now. Probably. Jennifer's strict about bedtime, at least. Do you want to talk about the divorce, or is that too heavy for a first date? First date. She'd called it a first date. Not a setup, not a joke, but an actual date. Is that what this is? Ethan asked. I don't know. What would you like it to be? Ethan thought about all the shoulds and supposed tos that had governed his life. He should be devastated by his divorce. He should be grateful his coworkers invited him anywhere. He should be alone tonight, in his empty house, accepting loneliness as his deserved fate. But sitting here with Naomi, feeling seen and valued for the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't want to should himself anymore. I'd like it to be a first date, he said. Then it's a first date. Naomi smiled. How am I doing so far? Better than I ever expected a first date could be. Even though it started with public humiliation? Especially because of that. If it had gone according to their plan, we'd have spent the evening performing for them. This way we got to be ourselves. Silver lining to cruelty? Maybe. Or maybe just luck. Naomi stood, Ethan's jacket still draped over her shoulders. Walk me to my car? I'm parked a few blocks from the restaurant. They walked slowly, neither in a hurry for the evening to end. The city had grown quieter, the early revelers heading home, the late-night crowd not yet emerged. Their footsteps echoed on the sidewalk, a rhythm that felt almost musical. Can I ask you something personal? Naomi said as they walked. After everything we've talked about tonight, I don't think there's much left that's too personal. Fair point. Here it is. Do you actually want to date again, or are you just going through motions because you think you should? The question stopped Ethan mid-stride. Did he want to date? Or did he just want to not be alone? Were those the same thing? I don't know, he admitted. Part of me thinks I should wait, get myself together, figure out who I am post-divorce. But another part of me is terrified that if I wait too long, I'll get comfortable being alone and never try again. And which part is louder? The terrified part. Always the terrified part. They reached Naomi's car, a sleek hybrid that suited her somehow, practical but elegant. She pulled keys from her purse and stood there, not yet ready to get in. I'm going to be honest with you, she said. Tonight was supposed to be a disaster. I expected awkward conversation, a mediocre meal, and a quick exit. Instead, it was... She paused, searching for words. A different kind of disaster? Ethan offered. She laughed. No, it was real. Messy and unexpected and sometimes painful, but real. And I haven't had that in a long time. Neither have I. They stood there in the pool of light from a street lamp, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and somehow made something genuine out of it. I'd like to see you again, Naomi said, if you're interested. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. This was it, the moment where he could step forward or step back, where he could choose fear or possibility. I'm interested, he said. Very interested. Naomi pulled out her phone. Then let's exchange numbers, real ones, not the ones your coworkers have. They swapped phones, entering contact information with the awkward, careful attention of people who didn't want to mess this up. When Ethan handed her phone back, their fingers touched briefly, and he felt electricity in the contact. I'll text you tomorrow, Naomi said. We can figure out something that doesn't involve audience participation. That sounds perfect. She hesitated, then leaned in and kissed his cheek. The gesture was brief, almost chaste, but it sent warmth spreading through Ethan's entire body. Good night, Ethan Parker, she said, slipping his jacket off and handing it back. Thank you for the most interesting evening I've had in years. Thank you for staying, for seeing me. You're worth seeing. She got in her car and Ethan stepped back onto the sidewalk. He watched her pull away, her taillights disappearing around a corner, and stood there for a long moment in the quiet night. His phone buzzed, a text from Naomi. Made it around the corner. Key must hit. Still thinking about profiteroles and honest conversations. Sleep well. Ethan typed back, You too. Thank you for tonight. For everything. He started walking toward the rideshare pickup point, his mind replaying the evening. The humiliation of the setup, the shock of Naomi's defense, the confrontation, the unexpected connection, all of it felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. But his phone held proof it was real. Naomi's number, her text, the promise of tomorrow. As he waited for his ride, Ethan realized something had shifted inside him. The weight he'd been carrying for 6 months, the shame, the sense of deserving his loneliness, the acceptance of cruelty as normal, it hadn't disappeared, but it had lightened. Because someone had looked at him, really looked at him, and seen worth. Not because he was pathetic and needed rescue, not because she pitied him, but because beneath the defensive armor and the accumulated hurt, there was still someone worth knowing. The rideshare pulled up, and Ethan climbed in, giving his address in a voice that sounded steadier than it had in months. He didn't know what Monday would bring. He didn't know if Derek would retaliate or if his coworkers would make his life unbearable. He didn't know if whatever had started with Naomi would last beyond tomorrow's text. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan felt like he might actually deserve to find out. The house was dark when Ethan arrived home, every window black against the night sky. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment before going in, looking at the modest townhouse that had once held a family and now held only the ghost of one. Jennifer had taken the porch furniture, claimed it was hers from before the marriage, so the small concrete stoop sat bare and unwelcoming. Inside, the silence pressed against him with familiar weight. Sophie's toys were arranged neatly in the living room corner, untouched since Thursday morning. The popsicle stick castle sat on the bookshelf, towers reaching toward the ceiling with 7-year-old determination. Ethan dropped his keys in the dish by the door and stood in the entryway, feeling the emptiness differently than usual. His phone buzzed. Another text from Naomi. "Hope you made it home safely. I keep thinking about what your coworkers said, getting angry all over again. How are you feeling?" Ethan typed. "Home safe." "Feeling? I'm not sure. I'm..." "Like I survived something?" Her response came quickly. "You did. We both did." He made his way to the kitchen, poured a glass of water he didn't really want, and sat at the small table where he and Sophie ate breakfast every morning. The chair across from him, Jennifer's old spot, remained perpetually empty. He'd thought about getting rid of it, buying a smaller table, but that felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to face. His phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. Ethan stared at it through 3 rings, his finger hovering over the decline button. But cowardice and curiosity warred inside him, and curiosity won. He answered. "Parker." Derek's voice was tight, controlled in a way that suggested he'd been drinking. "We need to talk about tonight." "I don't think we do," Ethan said. "You embarrassed me. You embarrassed all of us." "I told the truth." "Your version of it." Derek's laugh was harsh. "You made us look like monsters in front of a complete stranger. Do you have any idea how that reflects on the company, on the team?" Ethan felt anger kindle in his chest. "You made yourselves look like monsters. I just pointed it out. We were trying to help you, and you threw it back in our faces. Typical Parker, ungrateful even when people go out of their way for you. You used a fake photo to trick a woman into meeting me. You placed bets on when she'd leave. You turned my divorce into entertainment. That's not help, Derek. That's cruelty." Silence stretched across the line. Ethan could hear background noise, music, voices, the clink of glasses. Derek had gone to a bar after the restaurant, probably with Marcus and Brad, nursing drinks and nursing grudges. "Monday morning," Derek said finally. "My office, 9 sharp. If you value your job, you'll be there. And if I don't come, then I'll assume you're not interested in being a team player. And we both know how that works out for people at Morton and Associates." The threat was clear. Ethan had watched colleagues who didn't fit the culture get pushed out, denied promotions, given impossible workloads, frozen out of important projects until they quit or got fired. He'd always been grateful it wasn't him, had done everything possible to avoid that fate. But sitting in his empty kitchen, thinking about Naomi's words about valuing yourself, about drawing lines, he felt something harden inside him. "I'll be there," Ethan said. 9 sharp. He hung up before Derek could respond, his hand shaking slightly as he set the phone down. Fear and exhilaration mixed in his bloodstream, making his heart race. He'd just made an enemy of the most politically connected person in his department. Monday was going to be brutal. Another text from Naomi. "Still awake? Or am I bothering you?" "Still awake." Derek just called. Already? What did he want? To threaten me. Meeting Monday morning. The phone rang immediately, Naomi's name on the screen this time. Hey, Ethan answered. He actually called to threaten you? Naomi's voice carried barely controlled fury. It's been 2 hours. The man couldn't even wait until Monday? He's probably drunk. They went to a bar after the restaurant. Of course they did. Let me guess. He told you that you embarrassed him, that you're not a team player, that there will be consequences? How did you know? Because men like Derek are depressingly predictable. They can't handle being challenged, especially in front of someone they were trying to impress. Naomi's voice softened. Are you okay? I don't know. Scared, mostly. I need this job, Naomi. Sophie's tuition, the mortgage, the divorce settlement. I can't afford to lose this job. I understand. But can you afford to keep it at the cost of your dignity? Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. That's easy to say when it's not your mortgage on the line. You're right. I'm sorry. That was preachy. No, you're right too. I don't know what the alternative is. I'm 42 with a specialized skill set in a shrinking industry. If I lose this job, the next one will probably pay less, have worse benefits. I could be starting over from scratch. Or, Naomi said carefully, you could be starting over with your self-respect intact. They sat in silence for a moment, the phone line humming between them. Can I tell you something? Naomi asked. About why I understand more than you think. Please. 5 years ago, I was working at a prestigious firm in Chicago. Beautiful office, incredible projects, clients that every architect dreams about, and a boss who thought sexual harassment was a perk of the job. Ethan's stomach clenched. Naomi. It started small. Comments about my appearance, unnecessary touching during meetings, jokes that crossed lines. I told myself it was the price of working with brilliant people, that I needed to be professional and not make waves. Sound familiar? Yes, Ethan whispered. It escalated. Dinners that felt like dates, texts at inappropriate hours. Then one night, at a client event, he cornered me in a hallway and made his expectations very clear. I could sleep with him and advance my career, or I could refuse and watch everything I'd worked for disappear. What did you do? I reported him. Went to HR with documentation, witnesses, everything. And you know what happened? Nothing. He was too valuable, too connected, brought in too much money. They suggested I transfer to a different department, said they'd handle it quietly. Translation, shut up and be grateful we're not firing you for causing problems. Ethan closed his eyes, anger and pain washing through him for this woman he barely knew. I'm so sorry. I quit the next day, walked away from everything, the projects I'd poured myself into, the clients I'd cultivated, the salary that took me 10 years to build. Started over in a new city with a smaller firm and half the pay. Do you regret it? Some days, when I'm struggling to make rent or I see former colleagues working on dream projects. But then I remember what staying would have cost me, my self-respect, my safety, my soul. And I know I made the right choice. That's incredibly brave. It's survival, Ethan. Sometimes bravery is just refusing to accept abuse as normal. She paused. I'm not saying you should quit. That's your decision, and yours alone. I'm just saying I understand the calculation you're making, the fear you're feeling, and I'm telling you that whatever you decide, you'll survive it. I wish I had your confidence. You do. You showed it tonight. You stood up to Derek and the others, told them the truth, refused to play their game. That took courage. That took anger and having you there to back me up. I don't know if I can do it again on Monday when I'm alone. Then don't be alone, Naomi said simply. Document everything. Every conversation, every email, every threat. Build a paper trail. And if they retaliate, you take it to HR, to an employment lawyer if necessary. You have rights, Ethan. Rights don't always matter when you're powerless. You're not powerless. You just think you are because they've convinced you that you are. There's a difference. Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at the screen and his stomach dropped. Jennifer. Sophie's asking for you. Can you FaceTime? I need to go, he told Naomi. Sophie wants to talk. Of course. Call me tomorrow if you need to. Or just to talk. I mean that. Thank you. for everything tonight. Thank you for being worth the trouble." They hung up, and Ethan immediately called Jennifer's number. She answered but didn't turn on her camera, just passed the phone to Sophie. His daughter's face filled the screen, hair damp from a bath, wearing pajamas with cartoon dinosaurs. The sight of her made Ethan's chest ache with love and longing. "Daddy!" Sophie's voice was bright despite the late hour. "I miss you." "I miss you too, sweetheart. Are you having fun with Mommy?" "It's okay. We went to the park and saw a movie, but I wish you were here." "I wish I was there too. What movie did you see?" Sophie launched into an animated description of some animated feature about talking animals, her hands gesturing wildly as she explained the plot. Ethan listened, absorbing every detail, every expression, every reminder of why he put up with Derek and the others. This was why. Jennifer's voice cut in from off-screen. "Sophie, it's late. Say goodnight to Daddy." "But I just started talking to him." "You can talk tomorrow. Say goodnight." Sophie's face fell, and Ethan felt the familiar frustration of custody arrangements, of never having enough time, of someone else controlling when and how he connected with his own daughter. "Good night, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, Sophie. Sweet dreams. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon when Mommy drops you off." "Will you help me with my art project? I want to make a new building." "Of course. We'll work on it together." Sophie blew a kiss at the screen and disappeared. Jennifer's face appeared briefly, her expression neutral and tired. "She's been asking for you all day," Jennifer said. "You should call earlier next time." "You didn't text me until now." "I shouldn't have to. You should check in." It was an old argument, worn smooth by repetition. Ethan didn't have the energy for it tonight. "You're right," he said, taking the path of least resistance. "I'll do better." Jennifer looked surprised by his agreement, suspicious even. "Okay, well, good night, Ethan." "Good night." The screen went dark. Ethan sat in his kitchen, the silence rushing back in, heavier than before. He could still hear Sophie's voice in his head, see her animated expressions. In 12 hours, she'd be home and the house would be full again, full of noise and art projects and questions that required patient answers and the exhausting, wonderful work of being a parent. But until then, the silence. His phone buzzed. A text from Naomi. "How's Sophie?" "Perfect. Exhausting. Everything I needed to see tonight." "Good. Kids have a way of putting things in perspective. They really do." Ethan made his way upstairs, exhaustion finally catching up to him. His bedroom looked exactly as it had that morning. Bed half made, yesterday's clothes draped over the chair, Jennifer's empty closet standing open like an accusation. He'd been meaning to close it, to fill the space with something else, but every time he tried, his hand froze on the door. He changed for bed mechanically, brushed his teeth while staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at him seemed different somehow. Not younger or more handsome, the receding hairline and deepening lines remained, but less defeated. Like someone who'd survived something and lived to tell about it. His phone. "I should let you sleep, but I keep thinking about tonight and smiling. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being you." Ethan typed back. "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me. That hasn't happened in a long time. You deserve to be seen. So do you. Then let's keep seeing each other, properly. No setups, no audiences. Just us. I'd like that. Sleep well, Ethan Parker. Tomorrow's a new day." Ethan set his phone on the nightstand and lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around him. Tomorrow was Saturday. Sophie would come home in the afternoon, and they'd work on her art project, and he'd make her favorite dinner, spaghetti with the sauce that took 3 hours but made her smile like sunshine. Sunday they'd go to the park if the weather held, maybe visit the library to pick up new books for her collection. And then Monday would arrive with all its complications and consequences. But lying there in the dark, Ethan found he wasn't as afraid as he'd expected to be. The fear remained, fear of Derek's retaliation, of losing his job, of the uncertain future that stretched ahead. But alongside the fear sat something new and unfamiliar. Hope. Hope that maybe Naomi was right, that he did deserve better. Hope that standing up for himself wouldn't destroy everything. Hope that Friday night's disaster had planted seeds of something genuine. He fell asleep thinking about profiteroles and honest conversations, and the way Naomi's eyes had softened when she told him he was worth seeing. Saturday morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the bedroom curtains. Ethan woke to his phone buzzing, not an alarm but a string of texts that had come in while he slept. From Derek. Don't forget. Monday, 9 a.m. We need to discuss your future at the firm. From Marcus. Dude, what were you thinking last night? Derek's pissed. You need to smooth this over. From Vanessa. I'm sorry about how things went. Can we talk? I feel terrible. And from Naomi. Good morning. Coffee shop near the park at 10? My treat. Only if you want to. No pressure. Ethan ignored the first three and responded to the last. I'd love to. Text me the address. He showered and dressed with more care than usual, finding a shirt that didn't need ironing and jeans that fit properly. The man in the mirror still looked 42 and tired, but there was something different in his eyes. Determination, maybe. Or just the absence of complete defeat. The coffee shop was one of those aggressively hip places with exposed brick and reclaimed wood furniture, the kind Jennifer would have mocked for being pretentious. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early and found Naomi already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She looked different in daylight and casual clothes, jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair still damp from a recent shower. But that presence, that quality that had filled the restaurant last night, remained. I ordered for you, she said as he approached. Black coffee seems safe, but I can get you something else if you prefer. Black coffee is perfect. Ethan sat across from her, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been last night. The adrenaline and anger that had carried him through dinner had evaporated, leaving only the reality of sitting across from this remarkable woman in the unforgiving light of day. Did you sleep? Naomi asked. Eventually. You? Not much. I kept replaying the evening, getting angry all over again at your coworkers. That makes 2 of us. Ethan wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, grateful for something to do with them. I got texts from them this morning. Derek reminding me about Monday's meeting. Marcus telling me I need to smooth things over. Vanessa apologizing. Vanessa apologized? Said she feels terrible about how things went. Naomi's expression hardened. She should feel terrible, but feeling terrible isn't the same as taking responsibility. Did she acknowledge what they did was wrong, or just that the evening didn't go as planned? Ethan thought about the text, its carefully vague language. The second one, I think. Of course. Naomi took a sip of her coffee. People like that are very good at apologizing for consequences while avoiding accountability for actions. You sound like you've dealt with this before. Too many times. The boss I told you about? After I quit, he sent me a text saying he was sorry I felt uncomfortable. Not sorry for what he did, just sorry I had feelings about it. Like my discomfort was the problem, not his behavior. What did you say? Nothing. I blocked his number and never looked back. Naomi set down her cup. But I know it's different when you can't just walk away, when there are mortgages and kids and consequences that matter more than pride. Sophie doesn't know anything about this, Ethan said quietly. The divorce was hard enough on her. I don't want her to know that Daddy's being bullied at work like she sometimes gets bullied at school. Does she get bullied? Sometimes. Last year, some kids made fun of her popsicle stick castle project, called it stupid and babyish. She came home crying, asking if she should give up building things. What did you tell her? That the people who mock creative work are usually the people too scared to create anything themselves. That she should be proud of what she built, and that their opinions said more about them than about her. Naomi smiled. Good answer. I just wish I could take my own advice. Maybe you are. You stood up last night. That's a start. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the coffee shop humming with Saturday morning energy around them. A barista called out drink orders. The espresso machine hissed and steamed. Couples and friends clustered at tables discussing weekend plans. Can I ask you something? Ethan said. Why are you here? I mean, really, after last night, you could have just sent a polite text and moved on with your life. But you're here, buying me coffee, listening to my work problems. Why? Naomi considered the question carefully, her fingers tracing patterns on her coffee cup. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Part of it is what I said last night. I saw myself in you, and helping you feels like helping the version of me that didn't stand up for herself soon enough. But it's also, she paused, searching for words. You're interesting, Ethan. Not in the way Derek meant when he told me I'd be meeting someone interesting, but genuinely. You're thoughtful and honest, and you're trying so hard to do right by your daughter, even when everything else is falling apart. That's attractive. Attractive, Ethan repeated, the word feeling foreign applied to himself. Yes, is that surprising? Jennifer spent our last year together making it very clear I wasn't attractive anymore, that I'd let myself go, gotten boring, stopped trying. I guess I internalized that. Jennifer sounds like she was dealing with her own issues and projecting them onto you. Maybe. Or maybe she was right and I did stop trying. Marriage got comfortable and I got lazy. Ethan. Naomi waited until he met her eyes. If you stopped trying, it's because the relationship stopped being worth the effort. That's not laziness. That's self-preservation. You're very good at reframing things. I've had a lot of therapy, learned to challenge the narratives I tell myself about my own failures. She smiled wryly. Doesn't always work, but I try. Ethan's phone buzzed. Another text from Derek. Radio silence isn't going to help your case. We can resolve this like adults, or we can do it the hard way. Your choice. He showed Naomi the screen. Charming, she said. He's trying to bait you into responding emotionally. Don't take the bait. What should I do? Nothing. Let him stew. Show up Monday morning prepared and professional. Don't engage with his provocations. That feels passive. It's strategic. Derek wants you scared and defensive. If you show up calm and prepared, you take away his power. Ethan's phone rang. This time it was Vanessa. He let it go to voicemail. They're circling, Naomi observed, trying to control the narrative before Monday. Should I talk to them? Try to smooth things over like Marcus suggested? Do you want to? Ethan thought about it. The old Ethan, the one from a week ago, would already be crafting apology texts, arranging peace offerings, doing whatever it took to make the discomfort go away. But the Ethan sitting in this coffee shop with Naomi felt different. No, he said. I don't want to apologize for telling the truth, but I also don't know how to handle Derek's retaliation. First, document everything, every threatening text, every conversation. Build a record. Second, don't go into that meeting alone. Request HR be present. That will make Derek even angrier. Good. Let him be angry. His anger is his problem, not yours. Naomi leaned forward. Listen to me. Men like Derek operate on fear and intimidation. They're bullies who've learned that threatening people gets results. The moment you stop being afraid, or at least stop showing fear, their power evaporates. Easier said than done. I know, but you've already started. Last night you faced them down in front of a restaurant full of people. Monday's meeting will be private, which means there's less audience, but also less accountability for Derek. That's why you want HR there. Witnesses matter. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Vanessa's voicemail notification. He ignored it. What are you doing this afternoon? Naomi asked. Besides picking up Sophie. Picking her up at 2, then probably art projects and dinner. The usual Saturday routine. That sounds nice. Normal. It is nice. She's the best part of my life, the only part that feels uncomplicated. Can I meet her sometime? When you're ready, I mean. No pressure. The question caught Ethan off guard. Jennifer had introduced Sophie to her new boyfriend, the personal trainer, after only 3 weeks of dating. Ethan had thought it was too soon, too reckless with their daughter's emotions. But here was Naomi asking permission, offering to wait until he was ready. I'd like that, Ethan said. Maybe not immediately, but soon. She'd like you, I think. She appreciates people who take her seriously. I'm good at taking people seriously. It's taking myself less seriously that I struggle with. They finished their coffee while talking about lighter things. Books they'd read, movies they'd seen, the city's best hidden restaurants. Naomi had opinions on architecture that made everyday buildings interesting, pointing out design elements Ethan had never noticed. He found himself relaxing into the conversation, the fear about Monday temporarily pushed to the background. I should go, Ethan said finally, checking the time. Need to clean the house before Sophie gets home. Jennifer will judge me if there's mess. Will she come in? Just to the door, usually. But she always looks past me, checking for disorder. That must be exhausting. It's just how it is. Naomi stood with him, gathering her purse and jacket. Outside the coffee shop, they stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to leave. Thank you for this, Ethan said, for meeting me, for listening, for making last night's disaster into something that feels less disastrous. Last night wasn't a disaster. Last night was the beginning of something, Naomi smiled. At least, I hope it was. Me too. She kissed his cheek again, the same brief gesture from last night, but somehow more intimate in the daylight. Text me after your meeting Monday. Let me know how it goes. I will. Ethan watched her walk to her car, the same hybrid from last night, and felt that strange lightness in his chest again. Hope mixed with fear mixed with something he hadn't felt in years, anticipation of a future that might actually be good. He drove home thinking about Monday's meeting, about Derek's threats, about the very real possibility that standing up for himself would cost him his job. The fear was real and rational. But so was the memory of sitting in that restaurant, finally telling the truth after 6 months of swallowing humiliation. The house still needed cleaning. Sophie still needed picking up. Monday still loomed with all its complications. But driving through Saturday morning traffic with the memory of Naomi's smile fresh in his mind, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in the empty months since Jennifer left. He felt like maybe, possibly, he might actually deserve happiness. And that feeling, fragile as it was, felt worth protecting, even if it meant facing Derek's anger, even if it meant risking everything comfortable and known for something uncertain and terrifying. The townhouse came into view, small and ordinary and full of memories both bitter and sweet. Ethan pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering himself. Inside waited the work of preparing for Sophie, of being a father, of maintaining the life he'd built even as everything else crumbled. But he wasn't just that anymore. Wasn't just Sophie's dad. Wasn't just the divorced guy at work. Wasn't just the punchline in someone else's cruel joke. He was also the man who'd stood up to his bullies, the man who'd had an honest conversation with a remarkable woman, the man who might possibly have a future worth fighting for. His phone buzzed one more time. Naomi. You've got this. Monday, Sophie, all of it. Don't forget that. Ethan typed back, thank you for believing that. I'm trying to believe it too. Keep trying. I'll be here. He got out of the car and went inside to clean his house, to prepare for his daughter, to live the next few hours of his ordinary life. But the ordinariness felt different now, charged with possibility, weighted with choices that mattered. Monday would come whether he was ready or not. Derek would threaten, the office would whisper, consequences would unfold. But Ethan had tasted something Friday night in that restaurant. Self-respect, dignity, the bone-deep knowledge that he didn't deserve to be treated cruelly just because someone found it entertaining. And he'd discovered he wasn't willing to go back to accepting it. Whatever that cost him, whatever price he'd have to pay, some things were worth losing a job for. Like believing, finally, after 42 years, that he deserved to be seen, valued, and treated with basic human decency. It was a start. Sophie burst through the door at 2:15 with the kinetic energy of a small hurricane, dragging her weekend bag behind her and talking before she'd even fully entered the house. Daddy, Daddy, guess what? We saw the biggest dog at the park, like bigger than me, and Mommy said it was a Great Dane, and it licked my face, and it was gross but also funny, and can we get a dog, please? Ethan caught her in a hug, breathing in the strawberry shampoo scent of her hair. We've talked about the dog thing, sweetheart. Our yard is too small. But we could get a small dog, like a tiny one, smaller than the Great Dane. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. She looked tired, Ethan noticed, with circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Her new boyfriend, Brad or Brett, Ethan could never remember, waited in the car, engine running. She's been talking about that dog for 2 hours, Jennifer said. Good luck. Thanks for bringing her back. Jennifer's eyes did their usual sweep of the visible house, cataloging disorder. Ethan had cleaned for an hour, but he could see her noting the stack of unfolded laundry on the couch, the breakfast dishes still in the sink. Her allergy medicine is in the bag, Jennifer said, and she needs to finish her math homework before Monday. Don't let her talk you out of it. I know her homework schedule, Jennifer. I'm just reminding you. Last time she came back, it wasn't done. The criticism stung because it was true. 2 weeks ago, Sophie had convinced him that she'd finished everything, and he'd believed her because he wanted to. Jennifer had called him irresponsible when the teacher sent a note home. "It'll get done," Ethan said. Jennifer lingered like she wanted to say something else. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Are you okay?" she asked finally. "You look different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Less—" She searched for the word. "Less defeated, maybe." Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. Was he less defeated, or just better at hiding it? "I'm fine," he said. Jennifer nodded, clearly not believing him, but also not caring enough to push. "Okay, well, I'll pick her up next Friday. Same time." She left without saying goodbye to Sophie, who'd already disappeared into the living room to examine her popsicle stick castle. The car pulled away, and Ethan closed the door on another week of shared custody, another slice of his daughter's life that he'd only experienced secondhand through her stories. "Daddy," Sophie called, "can we start my new project now? I want to make the Chrysler Building." Ethan found her surrounded by craft supplies, popsicle sticks, glue, cardboard, markers in every color. Her face was alight with creative excitement, the same expression she got when building anything. "The Chrysler Building is pretty complicated, sweetie. Maybe we should start with something simpler?" "But I looked at pictures on Mommy's phone. I know how to do it, see?" She held up a piece of paper covered in her careful 7-year-old handwriting and sketches. She'd actually planned it out, measured proportions, thought through the construction. Looking at her work, Ethan felt pride swell in his chest. This was Jennifer's daughter too, but in this moment, this focus, this determination, this careful planning, she was entirely his. "Okay," he said, sitting down beside her. "Let's build the Chrysler Building." They worked for 2 hours, Sophie directing and Ethan executing the delicate cuts she couldn't manage yet. She narrated constantly, explaining her design choices, asking questions about how real buildings stayed standing, why the Chrysler Building had that particular Art Deco style. "It's like the building is wearing a fancy hat," she said, studying a reference photo. "The top part is the hat." "That's a good way to describe it." "Is that what architects do? Make fancy hats for buildings?" Ethan laughed. "Sort of. They make buildings beautiful and functional at the same time." "Like Naomi?" The name stopped Ethan mid-cut. "What?" "Naomi, you said her name in your sleep last night when I called. Who is she?" Ethan's mind raced. He'd been asleep when Sophie called? He didn't remember that. But Sophie had always been observant, catching details adults missed. "She's someone I met," Ethan said carefully. "A new friend. A friend like Uncle Marcus?" Sophie's nose wrinkled. She'd met Marcus once at a company picnic and declared him loud and mean. "No, a different kind of friend." "A girlfriend?" 7-year-olds had radar for this kind of thing. Ethan set down the scissors and gave Sophie his full attention. "Maybe. It's very new. We just met." Sophie considered this, her small face serious. "Is she nice?" "Very nice. She's an architect. She designs buildings like we're building." "Really?" Sophie's eyes lit up. "Can I meet her?" "Someday, if you want to. But let's not tell Mommy yet, okay? It might make her sad." Sophie nodded solemnly, understanding the delicate diplomacy of divorce, even if she couldn't articulate it. "Okay, but I want to meet her. I want to ask her about buildings." They returned to the Chrysler Building, Sophie chattering about architecture and fancy hats, and whether they could visit New York someday to see the real thing. Ethan listened, answered, helped, and tried not to think about Monday's meeting looming 36 hours away. Dinner was spaghetti, as promised, with the sauce that took 3 hours but made Sophie declare him the best cook in the world. They ate at the small kitchen table, Sophie talking around mouthfuls of pasta about the movie she'd seen with Jennifer, the Great Dane, her friend Emma's birthday party next week. "Daddy?" she said during a rare quiet moment. "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "Mommy asked if you were happy before she left. She said you looked different. What do you think? Do I look different?" Sophie studied him with unsettling intensity. You smile more, like real smiles. Not the pretend ones you do when you're sad, but trying to hide it. The observation pierced him. He thought he was protecting her, hiding his pain behind false cheer, but children saw everything. I am happy, Ethan said, and realized as he said it that it was partly true. Not entirely. Fear and uncertainty still lurked beneath the surface, but genuinely, partially true. I'm happy right now, eating spaghetti with you. Me too. Sophie reached across the table to pat his hand, a gesture so adult it made him want to laugh and cry simultaneously. I like it when you're happy. After dinner came bath time, then the nightly negotiation about how many pages they'd read before bed. Sophie lobbied hard for an entire book, settled for 3 chapters when Ethan held firm. They read curled up in her bed, Sophie's damp hair soaking into his shirt, her small body warm against his side. Daddy? She murmured as he was closing the book. If you have a girlfriend, does that mean you won't be lonely anymore? The question stabbed directly into the soft parts of his heart. Were you worried about me being lonely? Sometimes you look sad when you think I'm not watching, like when you sit at the table by yourself or when you look at the empty chair where Mommy used to sit. Ethan pulled her closer, throat tight. I won't lie to you, Sophie. Sometimes I am lonely, but I have you, and that makes everything better. But you need grown-up friends too. That's what my teacher says. Everyone needs friends their own size. He laughed despite the tears threatening behind his eyes. Your teacher is very smart. So Naomi is good? She makes you less lonely? She might. It's too early to know for sure, but yes, she's good. Okay. Sophie yawned, her eyes already drifting closed. I'm glad you have a friend your own size. Ethan kissed her forehead and stood, tucking the blankets around her small form. She was asleep before he reached the door, one arm flung over her stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful in a way that made him ache with love. Downstairs, he cleaned the dinner dishes and stared at his phone. Text from Derek. Last chance to make this right before Monday. Your call. Text from Naomi. How's the evening with Sophie? He responded to the second. Perfect. She asked about you. Wants to meet you. Already? That was fast. She's perceptive. Heard me say your name, apparently. What did you tell her? That you're my friend. A friend my own size, according to her teacher's wisdom. Naomi sent back a laughing emoji. Then, I like her already. And I'd love to meet her when you're ready. Soon. Maybe next weekend? I'll bring my A game. Nothing scarier than impressing a 7-year-old. She'll love you. Fair warning, though. She'll interrogate you about architecture. Perfect. I'll prepare a presentation. They texted for another hour, conversation flowing easily from Sophie to work, to their own childhoods, to favorite books. Ethan found himself laughing at her stories, sharing memories he hadn't thought about in years, feeling lighter than he had in months. Finally, close to 11. You should sleep. Monday's coming whether we're ready or not. I know. I'm trying not to think about it. Think about this instead. No matter what happens Monday, you've already won. You stood up for yourself. You know your worth. Derek can't take that away. He can take my job. Jobs can be replaced. Self-respect is harder to rebuild. Trust me on that. Ethan wanted to believe her. He did believe her, in the abstract. But lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the practical realities pressed down on him. The mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, Sophie's school tuition, the car that needed new brakes, the everyday expenses that required steady income. He could survive losing his job. People did it every day. But the transition, the uncertainty, the interviews, the possibility of earning less, it all terrified him in ways that Derek's anger never could. His phone buzzed. A final text from Naomi. Stop spiraling. I can feel you thinking yourself into panic from here. Breathe. You've got this. How did you know? Because I've been where you are. The 3 a.m. panic about money and consequences. It's normal, but it's also not helpful. So breathe, get some sleep, and remember, you're not alone in this. Thank you. Anytime. Good night, Ethan. He fell asleep eventually, dreams full of conference rooms and collapsing buildings, and Sophie asking if he was happy while the world crumbled around them. Sunday passed in a blur of normal routine, breakfast with Sophie, a trip to the park where she made friends with another girl, and they built an elaborate fort from sticks and leaves, grocery shopping where Sophie lobbied unsuccessfully for cookies and successfully for strawberries. They finished her Chrysler building in the afternoon, Sophie adding careful details with markers until it actually resembled the iconic structure. "Can we give it to Naomi?" Sophie asked as they admired their work. "Don't you want to keep it?" "We can make more, but this one should go to her, since she's an architect and she'll appreciate it." The gesture made Ethan's heart swell. "I think she'd love that. We'll give it to her when you meet." Jennifer picked Sophie up at 6, their daughter chattering about the park and the building and conveniently forgetting to mention Naomi. Jennifer listened with half her attention, clearly distracted by something on her phone. "Same time Friday," she said as Sophie gathered her things. "Wait," Ethan said. "Can we talk for a minute?" Jennifer sighed. "If this is about increasing your custody time, it's not. I just wanted to ask, are you happy with Brad?" "Brett. His name is Brett." Jennifer's expression softened slightly. "Why do you ask?" "Sophie's been asking me if I'm happy, made me wonder if you are." Jennifer studied him, really looked at him for the first time in months. "I'm trying to be. It's complicated." "Isn't it always?" "I suppose." She shifted her weight, uncomfortable with genuine conversation after so many months of logistical exchanges. "Are you? Happy?" "I'm trying to be too." Jennifer nodded. "Good. That's good. Sophie deserves parents who are trying." She left with Sophie, and Ethan stood in his empty house feeling the weight of Sunday evening pressed down on him. Tomorrow. Tomorrow he'd face Derek, face consequences, face the possibility that standing up for himself had cost him everything. His phone. "Ready for tomorrow?" "No. But I'm going anyway. That's all anyone can ask." "Want to talk strategy?" "Please." Naomi called immediately. They spent an hour going over what to expect, how to respond, what to document. She'd clearly researched employment law, had suggestions for phrasing that protected his rights without being confrontational. "Remember," she said, "Derek's going to try to intimidate you. He'll use his position, his connections, the power differential. Don't let him. You have rights as an employee. You can request HR presence. You can ask for specific documentation of any complaints. You can take notes during the meeting. That'll make him angrier. Let him be angry. His anger is his problem. Your job is to stay calm, professional, and documented. What if he fires me? Then you file for unemployment, consult an employment lawyer about wrongful termination, and move on. But he probably won't fire you, Ethan. Firing you creates liability. He'll more likely try to make you quit, give you impossible workloads, freeze you out of projects, make your life miserable until you leave on your own. That sounds worse than being fired. It is, but it's also illegal if it constitutes retaliation for protected activity, which is why documentation matters. They talked until midnight, Naomi walking him through scenarios, helping him prepare responses, bolstering his courage when it flagged. Finally, exhausted, they said goodnight. "Text me tomorrow," Naomi said, "as soon as the meeting's over. I'll be thinking about you." "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'd do this without you. You do it because you have to, but I'm glad you don't have to do it alone." Ethan lay in bed, Naomi's advice running through his mind. Request HR presence. Take notes. Stay calm. Document everything. Simple instructions that felt impossibly difficult, but he'd done impossible things before. He'd survived his marriage ending. He'd learned to be a single father. He'd stood up to Derek in a crowded restaurant. Surely he could survive one meeting. Monday morning arrived with gray skies threatening rain. Ethan dressed carefully, his best suit, the one he saved for important client meetings, the one that made him feel slightly more competent than he actually was. He ate breakfast mechanically, barely tasting the toast and coffee, his stomach churning with anticipation. The drive to work felt like driving to an execution. Every red light seemed designed to extend his anxiety, every mile marker another step closer to confrontation. He arrived at 8:45, 15 minutes early, and sat in his car rehearsing what to say. His phone buzzed. "Naomi, you've got this. Remember, Calm, professional, documented. And no matter what happens, you did the right thing Friday night. Marcus was waiting at Ethan's cubicle when he arrived, looking uncomfortable and slightly hungover. Parker, hey, can we talk? I have a meeting at 9. I know, that's what I want to talk about. Look, Derek's really pissed, like career-ending pissed. I'm trying to help you here. Help me how? Marcus glanced around, lowered his voice. If you apologize, say you were drunk, say you overreacted, blame it on the divorce, whatever. Just apologize and this all goes away. And if I don't? Then Derek's going to make an example of you. He's already talked to HR about your behavior at the restaurant, about how you embarrassed the company in front of a client. Naomi wasn't a client. Derek's calling her a potential client, architecture firm, possible consulting relationship. He's building a case that you damaged business relationships with your outburst. Ethan felt cold. Derek was strategic, he'd give him that. Reframing Friday night as a business disaster rather than personal humiliation gave him leverage, made Ethan's honesty look like professional misconduct. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth, Ethan said quietly. Marcus's expression shifted from concerned to frustrated. Then you're on your own. I tried to help. Did you? Or did Derek send you to soften me up before the meeting? Marcus's face answered the question. He walked away without another word, leaving Ethan alone with 9 minutes until his professional execution. He walked to Derek's office at exactly 9 a.m., knocked once, and entered. Derek sat behind his massive desk, Marcus and Brad flanking him like bodyguards. The power play was obvious, 3 against 1. Derek in the position of authority, Ethan standing like a supplicant before judgment. Sit, Derek said, not looking up from his computer. Ethan sat in the single chair positioned directly in front of the desk. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. What are you doing? Derek asked. Taking notes. For my records. This is a private conversation, which is why I want accurate notes. Unless you'd prefer I request HR be present to take official minutes? Derek's jaw tightened. That won't be necessary. Then I'll take my own notes. Ethan kept his voice level, channeling Naomi's calm confidence even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Derek closed his laptop with deliberate slowness. Let's talk about Friday night. Okay? You embarrassed me, embarrassed the team, and potentially damaged a valuable business relationship. That's unacceptable. What business relationship? Naomi Brooks is an architect at Morrison & Associates. They're a potential consulting partner for our real estate clients. Your outburst may have cost us that relationship. Ethan typed this into his notes, taking his time. Naomi never mentioned any business relationship with Morton & Associates. In fact, she seemed surprised you worked in accounting at all. Derek's expression flickered. Regardless of her awareness, the potential existed, which you destroyed with your behavior. My behavior? You mean when I pointed out that you'd arranged a blind date without my consent, used a misleading photo, and spent the evening making jokes at my expense? You're characterizing a friendly gesture as malicious. Was it friendly when you bet on how long Naomi would stay before leaving? Was it friendly when Marcus called my ex-wife's affair evidence that I was boring? Was it friendly when you told Vanessa's friend I was pathetic? Brad shifted uncomfortably. Marcus stared at the floor. Derek's face had gone red. You're twisting what happened, Derek said. I'm stating facts, which I'm documenting here. Ethan tapped his phone. Would you like me to request the restaurant's security footage? I'm sure their cameras captured most of the evening's conversation. It was a bluff. Ethan had no idea if the restaurant had cameras or if he could actually get footage, but Derek's expression suggested the threat landed. This isn't about Friday night, Derek said, changing tactics. This is about your ongoing performance issues, your attitude, your lack of team spirit, your inability to connect with colleagues. Performance issues. Can you provide specific examples, documented complaints, performance reviews that reflect these concerns? Derek's pause was telling. Your reviews have been adequate, but adequate isn't a performance issue. If you're claiming my performance is deficient, I'll need documentation. Specific examples, dates, projects, measurable failures. Your attitude? Attitude isn't a performance metric. unless you're suggesting that refusing to participate in bullying constitutes poor attitude, in which case I'd like HR involved in this conversation to discuss what qualifies as acceptable workplace behavior. The room fell silent. Ethan could feel his hand shaking but kept his voice steady, his words precise. Everything Naomi had coached him on, every piece of advice about staying calm and documented, flowed through him. "You've changed," Derek said finally. "The old Parker would have apologized by now, would have known his place." My place being what exactly?" "Someone we could trust, someone who understood how things work here." "How things work here being that I accept mockery and humiliation as the price of employment. How things work here being that you're part of a team. Teams have dynamics. Not everyone can be the star." "I never wanted to be the star," Ethan said. "I wanted to be treated with basic respect." Apparently that was too much to ask. Derek leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to be reassigned to different accounts, smaller clients, less visibility. You'll report directly to me now instead of the department head, and you'll be under performance review for the next 90 days. Any issues, any at all, will result in termination." Ethan typed this into his notes. "Is this reassignment related to my performance, or is it retaliation for Friday night?" "It's a business decision based on team dynamics." "Team dynamics that changed because I refused to accept bullying. That sounds like retaliation." "Call it what you want, Parker. This is how it is. You can accept it or you can resign. Your choice." There it was, the ultimatum Derek had been building toward all along: accept demotion and constant surveillance or quit. Either way, Derek won. Either Ethan suffered under impossible conditions, or he left and could be dismissed as someone who couldn't handle feedback. Ethan thought about his mortgage, about Sophie's tuition, about all the practical reasons he should accept this. But he also thought about Naomi's words: jobs can be replaced, self-respect is harder to rebuild. And he thought about Sophie asking if he was happy, about the relief he'd felt when Jennifer left, about standing in that restaurant telling the truth for the first time in months. "I need to think about it," Ethan said. Derek's surprise was visible. "What's there to think about?" "Whether working under these conditions is worth it. I'll have an answer for you by end of day." "Parker, you've given me an ultimatum. I'm taking time to consider it. Unless you're requiring an immediate answer, in which case I'd like that in writing along with the specific reasons for the reassignment." Derek's face had gone from red to purple. "Fine. End of day. But I want your decision in writing." "Of course." Ethan stood. "Is there anything else?" "Get out of my office." Ethan left, his legs shaking so badly he barely made it to his cubicle before collapsing into his chair. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and texted Naomi. "Meeting over. He's giving me an ultimatum. Accept demotion and constant surveillance or resign." I asked for time to think. Her response was immediate. "Proud of you for not caving to pressure. What are you thinking?" "That I can't work like this. That even if I accept, he'll find reasons to fire me anyway. That I'm trapped." "You're not trapped. You have options." "Meet for lunch?" "Please." They met at a quiet diner 2 blocks from Ethan's office. Naomi was already there, seated in a corner booth with coffee and a calm expression that made Ethan want to simultaneously hug her and fall apart. "Tell me everything," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. Ethan recounted the meeting, every word, every threat, every barely veiled retaliation. Naomi listened, asked clarifying questions, made notes on her own phone. "He's building a case to fire you," she said finally. "The performance review, the reassignment, the direct reporting, it's all designed to create documentation of failure even when you succeed. In 90 days, he'll have enough manufactured complaints to terminate you with cause. So I'm fired either way. I just get to choose whether it's now or in 3 months." "Not necessarily." Naomi leaned forward. "You could beat him to it. Resign now, but on your terms. Document that the resignation is due to hostile work environment and retaliation. File for unemployment. Consult an employment lawyer about wrongful termination. Resign." The word felt like defeat. Strategic resignation. There's a difference. You leave before he can build his case, you control the narrative, and you preserve your ability to fight back if necessary. I can't afford to be unemployed. Can you afford 3 months of escalating abuse, of working under constant surveillance while Derek manufactures reasons to fire you, of the mental health cost of that environment? Ethan thought about the last 6 months, the constant mockery, the casual cruelty that had become his normal. He thought about coming home exhausted, not from work but from defending himself, from staying small enough to avoid notice. I have to think about Sophie, he said. You are thinking about Sophie. You're thinking about what kind of father you want to be for her. The one who teaches her to accept abuse to keep a job? Or the one who shows her that self-respect matters more than security? That's not fair. Life's not fair, but you get to choose what you model for your daughter. Choose carefully. They sat in silence, Ethan pushing food around his plate without eating. His phone buzzed. Text from Vanessa. I heard about the meeting. I'm so sorry, Ethan. This isn't right. He showed Naomi the text. She read it and snorted. She's sorry, but did she do anything to stop it? Did she speak up in your defense? No. Then her sorry is worthless. Complicity with guilt is still complicity. Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Parker? This is Rachel Chen from Morrison & Associates architecture firm. Naomi Brooks suggested I call you. Ethan's eyes shot to Naomi, who smiled slightly. I'm sorry, what is this about? Ethan asked. We're looking for a business operations manager, someone with accounting expertise who can help us streamline our financial processes. Naomi mentioned you might be interested in a change. The pay is competitive, the culture is significantly better than what she's described about your current position, and we could start interviews as soon as this week if you're interested. Ethan's heart hammered. Yes, I'd be very interested. Excellent. I'll email you details this afternoon. We move quickly when we find good candidates, so this could happen fast if it's a good fit. She hung up. Ethan stared at his phone, then at Naomi. You called them? I mentioned you this morning, told them I'd met someone with excellent accounting skills who was looking for a better work environment. They've been trying to hire someone for months. The timing worked out. You did this for me. I did this because you're qualified and they need someone. The fact that it helps you is just fortunate timing. Ethan felt tears threatening. I don't know what to say. Say you'll interview. Say you'll consider that there are options beyond Derek's false choices. Say you'll stop thinking you're powerless when you absolutely are not. The waitress brought their check. Ethan reached for it, but Naomi was faster. My treat, she said. Consider it an investment in your future. They walked back toward Ethan's office building, neither in a hurry to arrive. The gray morning had cleared to pale sunshine, the city around them busy with Monday afternoon energy. What are you going to tell Derek? Naomi asked. I think I'm going to resign, on my terms, before he can manufacture his case. You're sure? No, I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of 3 months of what he described, of teaching Sophie that suffering is the price of security. Naomi stopped walking and turned to face him. You're making the right choice. It won't feel like it for a while. There will be fear and regret and moments of panic. But you're choosing yourself. That matters. What if the Morrison interview doesn't work out? Then you find something else. You have skills, experience, references that aren't Derek. You'll survive this. Will I? Yes, because you already have. You survived your marriage ending. You survived becoming a single father. You survived Friday night. This is just the next thing you'll survive and come out stronger from. Back at his office, Ethan opened his laptop and began typing his resignation letter. He kept it brief, professional, devoid of emotion. Effective immediately, he was resigning due to irreconcilable differences in workplace culture. He'd be available for reasonable transition support, but would not be serving a notice period. He printed it, signed it, and walked it to Derek's office at 4:45 p.m. Derek read it, his expression cycling through surprise, anger, and finally calculation. Running away? Derek asked. Leaving. There's a difference. You won't find another job like this. Not at your age, with your limited experience. Maybe not. But I'll find a job where I'm treated like a human being. That's worth the pay cut. Derek tossed the letter on his desk. Security will need your badge and laptop before you leave. Of course. Ethan pulled both from his bag and set them on Derek's desk. I've forwarded my current projects to the shared drive with transition notes. Everything's documented. He turned to leave, but Derek's voice stopped him. You think you've won something here, Parker? Ethan turned back. I think I stopped losing. That's enough for now. He walked out of Derek's office, past Marcus's avoiding eyes and Brad's smirk, past Vanessa, who stood in her cubicle looking stricken. He gathered his few personal items, a photo of Sophie, a coffee mug she'd made him, the popsicle stick model of the Chrysler building they'd built together. Security escorted him out at 5:15. Standard procedure for resignations, they said. Nothing personal. Ethan walked through the lobby one last time, badge surrendered, employed status revoked, future uncertain. On the sidewalk, he pulled out his phone and texted Naomi. I did it. I resigned. How do you feel? Terrified. Free. Like I just jumped off a cliff. The first few seconds of jumping always feel like falling. Give it time. Ethan stood on the sidewalk in the fading afternoon light, watching his former coworkers stream out of the building toward their cars and trains and buses. He'd been one of them that morning. Now he was unemployed, unmoored, untethered from the routine that had defined 15 years of his life. But he'd also stood up to Derek, had refused to accept demotion and surveillance as his deserved fate, had chosen his self-respect over security, had modeled for Sophie, even though she'd never know the details, that some things were worth losing a job for. His phone rang. Sophie's ringtone. Hey, sweetheart, he answered. I thought Mommy didn't let you call on school nights. She doesn't know. I'm hiding in the bathroom. Daddy, are you okay? You sound weird. The concern in her voice, this 7-year-old worrying about him, made Ethan's chest tighten. I'm okay, Sophie. Just had a big day at work. Good big or bad big? Complicated big. But I'm okay. I promise. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Now go back to dinner before Mommy catches you. She giggled and hung up. Ethan stood there holding his phone, his few possessions in a small box, his entire future uncertain. But for the first time in 6 months, maybe in years, he felt like he'd made a choice that was entirely his own. Not because Jennifer wanted it, not because his coworkers expected it, not because fear dictated it, but because he decided he deserved better. It was terrifying. It was freeing. It was a start. Naomi was waiting for him outside the building, leaning against her car with 2 cups of coffee from the shop where they'd met on Saturday. She held one out as he approached, and Ethan took it gratefully, his hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline. You actually did it, she said, studying his face. How does it feel? Like I'm either the bravest or stupidest person alive. Ask me again in a week which one. Come on, let's get you out of here before Derek looks out a window and ruins this moment. They drove to the same park where they'd sat Friday night, the city transforming from business hours to evening calm around them. Ethan sat on the bench with his box of belongings at his feet and stared at the fountain without really seeing it. I should feel relieved, he said after a long silence. I should feel free. Instead, I just feel scared. That's normal. You just blew up your life. Fear is the appropriate response. Very comforting. I'm not here to comfort you with lies. I'm here to remind you that fear doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Naomi turned to face him. Ethan, you've been afraid for months. Afraid of Derek, afraid of losing your job, afraid of being alone. You made this choice despite the fear, not because it disappeared. That's actual courage. Or desperation. Those aren't mutually exclusive, she smiled. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you can't survive the way things are and choose to change them, even when the change is terrifying. Ethan's phone buzzed. Email from Rachel Chen at Morrison & Associates. Available for a phone interview tomorrow at 10 a.m. We're moving quickly on this position. He showed Naomi the email. Tomorrow, she said. That's fast. Too fast. I'm not ready. I just quit my job 3 hours ago. I haven't updated my resume. I haven't prepared. Ethan, Naomi's voice cut through his spiral. You have 15 years of experience. You know your field. You don't need more preparation. You need to show up as yourself and trust that it's enough. What if it's not? What if I interview badly and don't get it and can't find anything else and what? You'll survive. You'll find another job. You'll figure it out. You've been catastrophizing for so long that you've forgotten you're actually competent. Ethan typed a response to Rachel. 10 a.m. works perfectly. Thank you for the opportunity. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then immediately wanted to take it back. But it was done. Tomorrow at 10, he'd interview for a job that could be his lifeline or just another disappointment. Where are you parked? Naomi asked. Other side of the building. I should go. Sophie will want to FaceTime before bed. Can I ask you something first? Of course. Naomi hesitated, unusual for her. Us, whatever we're calling it, it's moving fast. We met 3 days ago under the worst possible circumstances. You just quit your job partly because of advice I gave you. I don't want to be another impulsive decision you regret. Ethan set down his coffee and took her hand, the gesture feeling both natural and terrifying. You're not. You're the first thing in months that feels like it was my choice, not something that happened to me. Fast doesn't mean wrong. It doesn't mean right either. No, but I'd like to find out. He squeezed her hand. Unless you're having second thoughts. I'm always having second thoughts. It's my default state. But the first thoughts are pretty compelling. She smiled. Okay, we'll figure this out as we go. Just promise me something. What? That you won't make life decisions just to impress me or because you think it's what I want. I like you, Ethan Parker. The real you, not some version you're performing. Don't lose that trying to be what you think I need. The words hit him squarely in the chest. How many years had he spent trying to be what Jennifer needed, what his coworkers expected, what the world demanded? And here was Naomi, asking him to just be himself. I'll try, he said, though I'm not entirely sure who that is anymore. Then figure it out, and let me watch while you do. They sat until the park lights came on, talking about nothing important, favorite foods, worst movies they'd ever seen, places they wanted to travel but probably never would. Normal conversation, the kind that built foundation instead of drama. Eventually, Ethan's phone buzzed with Jennifer's text. Sophie wants to say goodnight. I should go, he said reluctantly. Go, be her dad. Text me after the interview tomorrow. I will. And Naomi, thank you. For all of it. Stop thanking me. You did the hard part. Ethan drove home through evening traffic, his mind racing between Sophie's goodnight call, tomorrow's interview, the complete uncertainty of his future. The house was dark when he arrived, and he sat in the driveway for a moment before going in, gathering himself. Sophie's face filled his phone screen moments later, bright and curious. Daddy, guess what? I got a gold star on my math homework. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. They talked for 20 minutes. About math, about her friend Emma's birthday party planning, about whether they could make a model of the Empire State Building next. Normal conversation with his extraordinary daughter, grounding him in what mattered. After Sophie went to bed, Ethan spent 3 hours updating his resume, preparing for the interview, researching Morrison and Associates. The firm was smaller than Morton and Associates, but well-respected, with a portfolio of sustainable design projects that actually looked interesting. The business operations manager role seemed designed for someone with his exact skill set. He fell asleep after midnight, exhausted and anxious, and woke at 6 with his heart already racing. The interview was in 4 hours. 4 hours to convince complete strangers that unemployed Ethan Parker was worth hiring, that his 15 years of experience outweighed the fact that he'd just rage quit his job. At 9:45, he sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, coffee, and notes spread around him. His phone buzzed. Naomi. Breathe, be honest. Let them see why you're worth hiring. You've got this. At exactly 10 a.m., his laptop rang with the video call. Rachel Chen appeared on screen, mid-30s, sharp suit, warm smile. Ethan, thanks for making time on such short notice. Thank you for the opportunity. Naomi spoke very highly of you. She said you're not only skilled, but also someone who values ethical workplace culture. That matters to us. The interview lasted 90 minutes. Rachel was joined by 2 partners, and they asked about his experience, his approach to financial management, his understanding of architectural project budgets. Ethan answered honestly, drawing on years of knowledge he'd accumulated at Morton and Associates, surprised by how easily it flowed when he wasn't performing for Derek's approval. "Can I ask why you're leaving your current position?" one of the partners asked. Ethan had prepared for this question, had crafted a diplomatic answer about seeking new challenges. But sitting in his kitchen, talking to people who seemed genuinely interested in him as a professional, he found himself telling the truth instead. "The culture became untenable. I was experiencing workplace bullying that escalated to the point where I had to make a choice between my self-respect and my job security. I chose self-respect." The three of them exchanged glances. Rachel leaned forward. "That must have been difficult. Can you tell us more about how you handled it?" Ethan described Friday night, not the personal humiliation, but the professional reality of being mocked by colleagues, of standing up for himself, of the retaliation that followed. He explained his decision to resign rather than accept a motion designed to create cause for termination. "That shows integrity," the older partner said. "A lot of people would have stayed and endured it. I have a 7-year-old daughter. I couldn't teach her that accepting abuse is the price of stability." Rachel smiled. "We'll need to check references, obviously. Do you have contacts at Morton and Associates who aren't part of the problematic situation?" Ethan provided 3 names, clients he'd worked with directly, a manager from a different department, someone who'd retired 2 years ago but knew his work. Not Derek, not Marcus, not anyone from that toxic circle. "We'll be in touch by end of day," Rachel said. "I'll be honest, we're impressed. We move quickly when we find good candidates, and you check a lot of boxes we've been struggling to fill." The call ended at 11:30. Ethan sat staring at his laptop, replaying every answer, every moment, trying to gauge whether it had gone well or whether he'd just torpedoed his best chance at immediate employment by being too honest about why he'd left. His phone. "How did it go?" "I think okay. I was honest about Derek and the bullying. Not sure if that was smart." It was smart. They need to know what they're getting. Someone with integrity who won't tolerate toxic culture. That's valuable. Or it makes me look like a problem employee who can't get along with people. "Stop. You did your best. Now you wait." Waiting was agony. Ethan cleaned the already clean house, did laundry that didn't need doing, organized Sophie's toys into categories she'd immediately scramble. At 3 p.m., his phone rang. Rachel Chen. "Ethan, we'd like to make you an offer." His heart stopped. "I'm sorry, what?" "An offer. For the business operations manager position. We checked your references. They all spoke very highly of your work. The client contacts particularly appreciated your attention to detail and communication. We're prepared to offer you $78,000 annually, full benefits, 3 weeks vacation, and a start date next Monday if that works for you." $78,000. That was $5,000 more than he'd been making at Morton and Associates, with better benefits, and 3 weeks vacation instead of 2. "Yes," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you." "Excellent. I'll send over the paperwork this afternoon. Welcome to Morrison and Associates, Ethan. We're excited to have you." She hung up. Ethan sat in his kitchen, staring at his phone, trying to process what had just happened. 27 hours after resigning from a toxic job, he had a new one. A better one. One that paid more and seemed to actually value him as a person. He called Naomi immediately. "I got it. They offered me the job." Her squeal of delight made him laugh. "I knew it. I knew they'd see what I see. When do you start?" "Next Monday. 78,000, 3 weeks vacation, full benefits. That's more than you were making. I know. I can't believe this is real." "Believe it. You earned this, Ethan, not because of luck or pity or anything except that you're good at what you do." They talked for an hour, Naomi asking about the role, Ethan still processing the whiplash of his life transforming in less than a week. Eventually, she had to go. Client meeting she'd rescheduled twice already. "Celebrate tonight," she said before hanging up. "You deserve it." Ethan ordered pizza and called Sophie, who shrieked with joy when he told her they could definitely afford the art supplies for the Empire State Building project. He didn't tell her about the job change. The conversation could wait until she was home, and he could explain it properly. That evening, Sitting in his living room with leftover pizza and the popsicle stick Chrysler building watching over him, Ethan let himself feel it. The relief. The pride. The staggering realization that standing up for himself hadn't destroyed his life. It had somehow improved it. His phone buzzed. Text from Vanessa. I heard you got a job at Morrison & Associates. I'm really happy for you, Ethan. You deserve better than how we treated you. He stared at the message, anger and something softer warring inside him. She was part of it. She'd laughed. She'd participated. She'd enabled Derek's cruelty. But she was also apologizing, however late and insufficient it might be. He typed back, "Thank you. I appreciate you saying that." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. That was enough for now. Friday afternoon arrived with Sophie bounding through the door, full of stories about Emma's birthday party and a substitute teacher who'd let them have extra recess. Ethan caught her in a hug and held on longer than usual. "Daddy, you're squishing me," she laughed. "Sorry, I just missed you." They spent the evening working on the Empire State Building, a more ambitious project than the Chrysler, requiring careful planning and Sophie's complete concentration. She narrated her design choices, asked questions about how tall buildings stayed standing, wondered aloud if she could be an architect when she grew up. "You can be anything you want," Ethan told her, "as long as you work hard and don't give up when things get difficult." "Like you?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "Mommy said you got a new job. She said you were brave to quit the old one, even though you were scared." Ethan felt gratitude toward Jennifer, genuine gratitude that she'd framed his choice as bravery instead of instability. "I was very scared," he admitted, "but sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." What was the right thing? Leaving a place where people weren't kind to me, choosing to work somewhere better. Sophie nodded seriously, absorbing this. "Is that why you're smiling more? Because you're somewhere better?" "I haven't even started yet, sweetheart. But yes, I think that's part of it." "Good. I like it when you smile real smiles." Saturday morning, Naomi came over for the first time. Ethan had cleaned obsessively, rearranged furniture twice, changed his shirt 3 times. When the doorbell rang at 10, Sophie raced to answer it before he could stop her. "Are you Naomi?" Sophie demanded, staring up at this tall stranger on their doorstep. "I am. You must be Sophie. Your dad told me you build incredible things." Sophie's wariness melted into pleased pride. "I do. Want to see my Chrysler building?" "I would love nothing more." Ethan stood back and watched as his daughter led Naomi inside, chattering about popsicle sticks and architectural proportions with the confidence of someone who'd found her audience. Naomi examined the Chrysler building with professional attention, asked genuine questions, offered suggestions that Sophie immediately incorporated into her mental design for the Empire State Building. "Your dad mentioned you wanted to give me this one," Naomi said, gesturing to the Chrysler building. "Only if you want it. Daddy said you're an architect, so you'd appreciate it more than most people." "I absolutely want it, if you're sure. It's beautiful work. I'll put it in my office where everyone can see it." Sophie beamed, and Ethan felt his heart expand watching these 2 most important people in his life connect over cardboard and glue. They spent the day at the park, Ethan, Sophie, and Naomi, playing on the swings, feeding ducks at the pond, building another stick fort that Sophie declared superior to last week's attempt. Naomi was natural with Sophie, treating her like a small adult whose opinions mattered, never talking down or patronizing. At one point, while Sophie was occupied with the fort, Naomi took Ethan's hand. "She's wonderful," Naomi said quietly. "You've done an amazing job with her. I'm just trying not to mess her up too badly." "You're doing better than just that. She's confident, creative, thoughtful. Those don't happen by accident. She makes it easy, most of the time." They watched Sophie add final touches to her fort, her tongue poking out in concentration, completely absorbed in her work. "Can I tell you something?" Naomi asked. "Something I wasn't sure I'd ever say to anyone." "Of course." "I always thought I didn't want kids. Told myself it was a career choice, that I was too selfish, too focused. But watching Sophie, watching you with her, I'm wondering if I was just waiting for the right situation, the right person." Ethan's breath caught. They'd known each other 6 days, 6 days of intensity and honesty and connection, but still. 6 days. That's terrifying to say out loud, Naomi continued. And I'm not saying I want kids tomorrow, or that I expect anything from you. Just that being around you two makes me reconsider assumptions I've had about myself for years. I understand that, Ethan said carefully. You've made me reconsider a lot of assumptions, too, about what I deserve, about what's possible, about whether I can actually be happy. And can you? Be happy. Ethan looked at Sophie, at Naomi, at this impossible week that had transformed his life. I think I'm learning how. For the first time in a long time, I actually think I might be. That evening, after Naomi left and Sophie was in bed, Ethan sat in his living room with the weekend stretching peacefully ahead. Monday would bring new challenges, a new job, new coworkers, the anxiety of starting over. But it would also bring possibility, the chance to build something better from the rubble of what he'd left behind. His phone buzzed. Naomi. Thank you for today. Sophie's as remarkable as you said. And watching you with her, you're a really good father, Ethan. Thank you for seeing us, both of us. How could I not? You're both worth seeing. Sunday was quiet. Sophie worked on her Empire State Building with single-minded focus while Ethan prepared for Monday, reviewing the materials Morrison and Associates had sent, researching current projects, trying to calm his nerves about walking into a new office, meeting new people, starting over at 42. Jennifer picked up Sophie at 6 with minimal commentary, just a brief nod and a good luck tomorrow that sounded almost genuine. Progress, Ethan thought. Small, incremental progress toward something resembling functional co-parenting. Alone in his house Sunday night, Ethan let himself reflect on the past week. 7 days ago, he'd been sitting at a table full of people who viewed him as a joke, waiting for a punchline to arrive in human form. Now he was unemployed from a toxic job, employed at a better one, dating a woman who saw him clearly, and teaching his daughter that self-respect mattered more than security. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the beginning of something he couldn't yet name but was learning to trust. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and Ethan's alarm going off at 6:30 instead of the usual 7. He dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard, and arrived at Morrison and Associates at 8:30 for his 9 a.m. start. Rachel Chen met him in the lobby with a genuine smile and a tour. The office was smaller than Morton and Associates, more open, with natural light and plants and people who actually looked happy to be there. She introduced him to the team, designers, project managers, support staff, and everyone seemed genuinely pleased to meet him, rather than sizing him up for weaknesses. Your office is here, Rachel said, opening a door to a small space with a window overlooking the city. Not huge, but it's yours. We believe in closed doors when you need focus. His own office. At Morton and Associates, he'd had a cubicle for 15 years. This was a door, walls, a window, privacy. This is perfect, Ethan managed. The morning passed in orientation, HR paperwork, system logins, introductions to ongoing projects. At lunch, 3 team members invited him to join them, and the conversation was easy, absent the edge of mockery that had characterized every lunch at his old job. At 3 p.m., Rachel stopped by his office. How's your first day going? Good, really good. Everyone's been incredibly welcoming. We try to maintain that culture. Life's too short to work with people who make you miserable. She paused. Naomi mentioned you came from a difficult situation. If you ever need to talk about workplace concerns, my door is always open. We take culture seriously here. Thank you. That means a lot. She left, and Ethan sat in his office with its window and its door and its complete absence of Derek's toxicity. He pulled out his phone and texted Naomi. First day is going well. Everyone's kind. I have an office with a window. This feels surreal. Not surreal, just what you deserve. How does it feel to be valued? Strange. Good. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. What if there is no other shoe? What if this is just better? Ethan considered that. What if this was just better? What if choosing self-respect had actually led to something good instead of disaster? The week passed quickly. By Friday, Ethan had settled into routines, learned names, contributed meaningfully to 2 project discussions. His coworkers treated him like a colleague instead of a target, asked his opinion and actually listened to his answers, included him in lunch plans without mockery. Friday evening, he picked up Sophie and they worked on the Empire State Building together, the project growing more elaborate as she added details she'd researched online. She was full of stories about school, about Emma's party, about her teacher praising her math improvement. "Daddy?" she said while carefully gluing a popsicle stick. "Are you happy now?" "Yes, sweetheart. I really am." "Good. Me too." That weekend, Naomi came over again, and this time the visit felt more natural, less like a test. They took Sophie to a museum, walked through exhibits about engineering and design, watched Sophie absorb information like a sponge. Afterward, they got ice cream and sat in the park while Sophie played. "She likes you," Ethan said. "Really likes you. That's rare. She's usually shy with new people." "I like her too. She's easy to like." Naomi licked her ice cream thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Where do you see this going? Us, I mean. We've been in crisis mode since we met. Now that life is settling down, I want to make sure we're on the same page." Ethan watched Sophie on the playground, her laughter carrying across the park. "Honestly, I don't know exactly where this is going. I just know I want to find out. I know that you make me want to be braver, more honest, more myself. I know that Sophie asks about you every day. I know that thinking about you makes me smile." "That's a good start," Naomi said softly. "What about you? Where do you want this to go?" "Somewhere real, somewhere honest. I don't need promises or timelines. I just need to know that we're both here because we choose to be, not because we're afraid to be alone." "I choose to be here," Ethan said. "Not because you rescued me from Derek, not because you got me a job interview, but because you saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. That matters more than I can say." "You were never invisible, Ethan. You just worked with people who chose not to see you. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Sophie play, feeling the future stretch ahead with possibility instead of dread. Monday morning of his second week at Morrison & Associates, Ethan arrived to find flowers on his desk. The card read, "Congratulations on your first week. We're glad you're here. The team." He stared at them, touched and slightly overwhelmed. At Morton & Associates, his 15th anniversary had passed without acknowledgement. Here, 1 week earned flowers and genuine welcome. Rachel stopped by mid-morning. "Settling in okay?" "More than okay. Thank you for this opportunity." "You're earning it. The project managers are already praising your financial analysis. You made the right choice coming here." "I made the right choice leaving there," Ethan corrected. "Coming here was luck and good timing." "Don't diminish yourself. You took a risk, bet on yourself, and it paid off. Own that." After she left, Ethan sat with that thought. He'd bet on himself. For the first time in maybe his entire adult life, he'd chosen self-respect over security and won. Not because the universe rewarded virtue, it didn't work that way, but because he'd been ready for the opportunity when it appeared. That weekend, 3 weeks after the disastrous dinner at Rousseau's, Ethan and Naomi took Sophie to the beach. They built sand castles, collected shells, watched Sophie shriek with joy when waves chased her up the sand. It felt ordinary and perfect, this day with no agenda except being together. In the evening, after Sophie fell asleep in the car on the drive home, Naomi reached across and took Ethan's hand. "I need to tell you something," she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. Here it came. The moment she realized this was too much, too fast, that dating a divorced single dad came with complications she didn't want. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm falling for you. Actually falling, not just interested or attracted. And it terrifies me because I swore I wouldn't do this again, wouldn't let myself be vulnerable with someone who could hurt me. But here we are, and I'm falling anyway, and I needed you to know." Relief and joy and terror flooded through Ethan simultaneously. "I'm falling too," he admitted. "Have been since you stayed at that restaurant when you could have walked away. Maybe even since you looked at me and saw someone worth defending. So what do we do about it?" "I think we keep falling and see where we land." Naomi laughed, soft and slightly teary. "That's terrifying advice." "It's all I've got. I'm making this up as I go." "Then we'll make it up together." They drove home in comfortable silence, Sophie sleeping in the back seat, the city lights beginning to glow against the evening sky. Ethan felt something settle in his chest, Not certainty exactly, but something close. The sense that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. A month after resigning from Morton and Associates, Ethan received an email from Vanessa. She'd left the firm too, she wrote. Derek's behavior had gotten worse after Ethan's departure, and she'd finally recognized what she'd been enabling. She was sorry, truly sorry, and hoped Ethan was doing well. He wrote back briefly, I'm glad you got out. I hope you find something better. We all deserve workplaces that don't require us to diminish ourselves. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was grace, and that felt like growth. 3 months in, Morrison and Associates offered Ethan a raise and a promotion to senior operations manager. Rachel delivered the news personally, explaining that his impact had exceeded expectations, that clients specifically requested his involvement in projects, that the team valued his contributions. You've transformed how we handle financial planning, she said. We're more efficient, more profitable, and better able to serve our clients. That's worth recognizing. Ethan accepted, feeling pride that was entirely earned, entirely his own. He'd done this, not by diminishing himself, not by accepting cruelty, but by being competent and valued and seen. That evening, he told Sophie about the promotion over dinner. Does this mean we're rich? She asked hopefully. Not rich, but comfortable, stable. Good. Can we go to New York to see the real Chrysler building? Someday soon. I promise. 6 months after that disastrous Friday night, Ethan and Naomi stood in his living room surrounded by boxes. He was moving. Not running away this time, but moving toward. A bigger place, closer to Sophie's school, with room for Naomi's things if and when that step felt right. You're sure about this? Naomi asked, surveying the chaos. Completely sure. This house has too many memories of who I was when I was breaking. I'm ready for somewhere that feels like who I'm becoming. Sophie ran through carrying a box labeled art supplies in her careful printing. Where does this go? Your new room, sweetheart. The one with the window seat. She disappeared upstairs, and Naomi pulled Ethan into a hug. I'm proud of you, she said, for all of it, for standing up to Derek, for choosing yourself, for building this new life. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have. You did, actually. You made the hard choices before I could have helped with any of them. I just got to witness it. You did more than witness. You reminded me I deserved better. That mattered. They stood in the chaos of the half-packed house, holding each other, feeling the solid reality of what they'd built together. Not a rescue, not a salvation story, but two people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and chosen to be brave together. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs. Daddy, Naomi, come see my new room. I already know where everything goes. They climbed the stairs hand in hand, following Sophie's excited voice, stepping into a future that was uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Parker felt like he deserved every moment of it. Not because someone had saved him, not because he'd gotten lucky, but because he'd finally learned to value himself enough to demand better. It was the beginning he'd needed all along. And this time, he was writing the story himself. The restaurant where it all began, Rousseau's, still stood in the Arts District with its Edison bulbs and expensive menu. Ethan drove past it sometimes on his way to Morrison and Associates, and each time he felt a strange gratitude for that awful evening. Not because the humiliation had been necessary or deserved, but because it had finally pushed him to choose himself. He never saw Derek or Marcus or any of them again. Heard through professional networks that Derek had been demoted after several HR complaints, that the toxic culture at Morton and Associates was slowly being addressed. It wasn't his problem anymore, and that felt like freedom. Sophie turned 8, then 9, her passion for architecture growing stronger. Naomi took her to job sites, taught her about sustainable design, encouraged her ambitions without making promises about the future. They were building something, the three of them. Not a traditional family exactly, but something genuine and earned. One evening, nearly a year after that disastrous Friday, Ethan sat in his new living room with Naomi curled beside him and Sophie working on yet another architectural model at the coffee table. Rain pattered against the windows. The house was warm, and he felt something he'd almost forgotten was possible. Peace. Not the absence of problems. There were always problems, always challenges, always uncertainties. But the deep knowledge that he could face them, that he had people who saw him and valued him, that he no longer had to make himself small to survive. "Daddy?" Sophie looked up from her model. "What are you smiling about?" "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "That's sappy," Sophie pronounced, but she was smiling too. Naomi squeezed his hand. "The good kind of sappy, though." And it was. The good kind. The earned kind. The kind that came from choosing yourself even when it was terrifying, from standing up even when you wanted to hide, from believing, finally, after 42 years, that you deserved to be seen and valued and loved. It had started with humiliation in an upscale restaurant. It had continued through fear and resignation and the terror of uncertainty. But it had led here, to this moment, to this life, to this version of himself that could finally look in the mirror and see someone worth respecting. Ethan Parker had been invisible for so long, but he'd learned that invisibility wasn't his natural state. It was just what happened when you surrounded yourself with people who chose not to see you. Now, surrounded by people who saw him clearly, he'd never felt more visible in his life. And that, finally, was enough.